This is a compilation of over 3 hours of why you wouldn't survive any zombie apocalypse explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with why you wouldn't survive a zombie apocalypse. A zombie apocalypse just hit your city. You've got 60 seconds before your neighborhood becomes a flesh-eating free-for-all. But you're going to make every single wrong decision. So today, I'm breaking down the brutal reality of why you wouldn't last a weekend in a zombie-infested city. And trust me, it's not for the reasons you think. Dopamine addict. Let's start with something nobody talks about in zombie movies. Your smartphone addiction is going to get you killed. On average, people check their phones 96 times a day. That's once every 10 minutes during waking hours. Your brain has been rewired to crave those little dopamine hits from notifications, likes, and messages from the buzz. When the apocalypse hits and the cell towers go down, you're not just losing communication. You're going cold turkey from a legitimate chemical addiction. While zombies are freaking out outside, you'll be experiencing withdrawal symptoms that include anxiety, depression, irritability, and most importantly, severely impaired decision-making abilities. Not to mention, you would have these symptoms amplified with an apocalypse anyway, unless you're just that guy. You'll find yourself unconsciously reaching for your dead phone during crucial moments, distracted and unfocused when you need to be most alert. That split second of reaching for your pocket instead of your weapon, that's when the zombie's gonna get you. But this is just one of many reasons, and coming up, we'll see why some of you would die for even dumber reasons, if that's even possible. Unlike starving, which is a surprisingly real danger. Not a farmer. 98% of people couldn't grow enough food to survive even if they had perfect conditions, unlimited time, and a library of farming books. You think you know about farming because you've seen some YouTube videos and maybe kept a houseplant alive for 3 months, but agriculture is insanely complex. Do you know what companion planting is? How to deal with soil pH? When to plant what crops based on your specific climate zone? How to preserve food without refrigeration? The signs of nitrogen deficiency in tomato plants? Even if you somehow get your hands on seeds, you're looking at months before any substantial harvest. And that's assuming you can keep zombies, other humans, and natural disasters away from your crops for an entire growing season. Most crops fail even under ideal conditions when grown by beginners. Let's say you're growing potatoes. Seems simple, right? Wrong. Plant them too early and they'll freeze. Too late and they won't mature before winter. The list goes on. It's pretty much over for your long-term food source. Meanwhile, you're burning 2,000, 3,000 calories a day just trying to survive, and that potato plant might give you 200 calories in 4 months if everything goes perfectly. Gangs. Forget zombies for a minute, the real threat is other people, and you're absolutely not prepared for the level of violence that desperate humans are capable of. Within weeks of societal collapse, organized groups will form, and they won't be the friendly community groups you see in movies. These won't be people sitting around campfires making democratic decisions. These will be ruthless organizations led by the most violent and manipulative individuals who rise to power in lawless situations. Think prison hierarchies, not town councils. You know what makes a good gang leader in an apocalypse? Experience with violence, sociopathic tendencies, and the ability to inspire fear. You know what makes a good gang member? Unquestioning loyalty and willingness to do terrible things to survive. Are you prepared to torture someone for information about food caches? Execute other survivors who pose a threat to your group? These groups will have strategies you haven't even considered. They'll use human bait to lure zombies into enemy camps. They'll contaminate water supplies. They'll take hostages from other groups to ensure compliance. They'll use psychological warfare that would make military interrogators uncomfortable. And here's the kicker. Even if you somehow join one of these gangs, your suburban background makes you a liability. Gang leaders eliminate liabilities quickly and efficiently. You're not valuable enough to keep around when resources get scarce, and you're too moral to be trusted with the dirty work that keeps these groups in power. So far, all of this has been manageable if you play it smart and get lucky, but the next one could easily be one of the craziest threats on the list. Need medicine, something that affects way more people than they realize. Medical dependency. Are you wearing glasses or contacts right now? Congratulations. You're operating with a massive survival disadvantage the moment your prescription eyewear breaks or gets lost. Sorry, 4 eyes. But it goes way deeper than vision problems. About 50% of adults take prescription medications regularly. Blood pressure medication, insulin for diabetes, antidepressants, heart medication, thyroid steroid medication, the list goes on. When pharmacies close and supply chains collapse, you've got maybe at most 3 months supply before you run out and your body starts giving up. Take diabetes as an example. There are about 37 million diabetics in the US. Without insulin, type 1 diabetics will die within days to weeks. Type 2 diabetics might last longer, but the stress of survival situations will spike blood sugar levels to dangerous heights. You'll be trying to outrun zombies while your body is essentially poisoning itself. Even seemingly minor medical needs become major problems. Need a CPAP machine for sleep apnea? Good luck getting quality sleep while manually breathing through zombie-filled nights. Have seasonal allergies? That constant sneezing and nasal congestion will compromise your hearing and breathing when stealth is essential for survival. Dental problems will become excruciating without modern dentistry. A simple cavity becomes an abscessed tooth, which becomes a life-threatening infection. Meanwhile, you're trying to fight zombies with half your face swollen and pain that makes it impossible to concentrate. And don't even get me started on mental health medications. Suddenly, stopping antidepressants or anxiety medications doesn't just make you sad. It can cause seizures, suicidal thoughts, and complete psychological breaks that make rational survival decisions impossible. Infrastructure knowledge. You flip a switch and lights turn on. You turn a handle and clean water flows out. You press a button and your house gets warmer. You have absolutely no idea how any of this actually works. And when it all breaks down simultaneously, you'll be completely helpless. The electrical grid isn't just power plants and wires. It's an incredibly complex system that requires constant human intervention to keep running. Power plants need fuel deliveries, maintenance crews, and computerized monitoring systems. When workers stop showing up and supply chains break down, you've got maybe 72 hours before widespread power failure. But losing electricity doesn't just mean no lights. It means no water pumps. So no running water. No fuel pumps, so no gasoline. No refrigeration, so all food spoils within days. No communication systems, so no coordination with other survivors. No medical equipment, so hospitals become death traps instead of healing centers. Water systems are even more complex. That water coming out of your tap has been through multiple treatment facilities, pumping stations, and testing checkpoints. When these systems fail, you're not just without running water. You're surrounded by contaminated water sources that will kill you faster than zombies. You probably think you can just boil water to make it safe, but do you know how long to boil it? What temperature kills different pathogens? How to identify water contaminated with chemicals versus biological threats? How to build a proper filtration system from scavenged materials. Most people can't even change their car's oil, but they think they'll be able to maintain complex survival systems when professional engineers and technicians are all dead or hiding. But we're only at NUV5. Wait until you see what's coming. You're weak. Can you run a mile without stopping? Carry 50 pounds for more than a few minutes? Go without food for 24 hours and still be able to fight for your life? Survival isn't just about being in decent shape. It's about extreme physical demands that would challenge professional athletes. You'll be carrying heavy packs for miles every day, climbing over obstacles, digging fortifications, moving heavy debris, and doing all of this on minimal food and sleep. Your soft, climate-controlled lifestyle has left you completely unprepared for physical hardship. You get winded walking up 2 flights of stairs, but you think you'll be able to outrun zombies while carrying survival gear? You complain about walking through a parking lot in the rain, but you think you'll handle sleeping outside in winter weather? Even if you're in decent shape now, the physical demands will break you down quickly. Professional soldiers in peak conditions struggle with extended survival situations. Your weekend hiking experience doesn't compare to the non-stop physical stress of apocalypse survival. Joint problems will develop from carrying heavy loads, muscle injuries from unfamiliar physical demands, foot problems from walking long distances in improper footwear, back problems from sleeping on hard surfaces. All of these issues compound until you're essentially disabled, making you easy prey for both zombies and hostile humans. And here's the thing about adrenaline. It makes you feel temporarily superhuman, but when it wears off, you crash hard. After your first zombie encounter, you'll experience an adrenaline crash that leaves you shaky, exhausted, and unable to function properly for hours. Perfect timing for the next wave of threats. Smart zombies. Every zombie movie treats zombies like mindless, shambling idiots who can barely walk in straight lines. But what if that's wrong? What if the virus or whatever causes zombification doesn't destroy intelligence? It just redirects it? Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. A virus or parasite that keeps its host functioning at higher levels would be more successful at spreading. Dumb zombies stumble into traps and get destroyed easily. Smart zombies learn from mistakes, set traps of their own, and adapt their hunting strategies. Imagine zombies that can remember layouts of buildings they've been through before. Zombies that learn to recognize the sound of specific weapons and take cover. Zombies that can coordinate attacks, using some to distract while others flank their prey. Zombies that figure out how to operate simple tools or even vehicles. What if zombies retain muscle memory from their previous lives? A zombie who used to be a mechanic might still know how to hotwire cars. A zombie who was a hunter might still know how to track prey silently. A zombie who was a soldier might retain tactical knowledge about combat and strategy. There's evidence that parasites can modify behavior in incredibly sophisticated ways. The Toxoplasma parasite makes mice attracted to cat urine, essentially making them seek out their predators. The Cordyceps fungus controls ant behavior with precision, making them climb to optimal locations for spore dispersal. A zombie plague caused by an intelligent parasite might create zombies that can plan, problem solve, and learn. They might use human bait to lure survivors into traps. They might learn to mimic human voices to trick people into opening doors. They might even retain enough human knowledge to predict where survivors are likely to hide. All your zombie survival plans assume you're dealing with stupid enemies. If zombies can think and adapt, every strategy you've ever considered becomes obsolete overnight, going insane. Humans are social creatures who need regular interaction with others to maintain mental health. In survival situations, you'll either be completely alone or stuck with a small group under extreme stress. Either scenario is a recipe for severe psychological breakdown. Isolation doesn't just make you sad, it causes actual cognitive decline. Your brain literally shrinks from lack of social stimulation. You'll start having conversations with inanimate objects, making increasingly irrational decisions, and potentially developing full psychotic episodes complete with hallucinations. But being with other people isn't much better when everyone is traumatized and desperate. You'll witness horrible things that your brain isn't equipped to process. Watching friends get torn apart by zombies, having to kill infected loved ones, making life or death decisions about who gets limited resources, these experiences will fundamentally break your mental processes. Post-traumatic stress disorder will hit everyone within weeks. You'll have flashbacks at the worst possible moments, panic attacks when you need to stay calm, and hypervigilance that prevents you from ever getting adequate sleep. Your judgment will become increasingly impaired as your mental state deteriorates. Sleep deprivation will make everything worse. Quality sleep becomes impossible when you're constantly listening for threats. You'll be operating on 2 to 3 hours of interrupted sleep per night, which causes hallucinations, paranoia, and severely impaired decision-making within days. Depression will set in as the reality of your situation becomes clear. Everyone you cared about is probably dead. Everything you worked for is gone. There's no hope of returning to normal life, and each day is just about surviving until the next day. This isn't temporary sadness. This is soul-crushing despair that makes it difficult to summon the will to keep fighting. You'll develop trust issues that make cooperation with other survivors nearly impossible, but you can't survive alone. It's a psychological catch-22 that most people can't navigate successfully. Resource management. You've seen movies where people find a well-stocked bunker or abandoned store and think they're set for months. In reality, resource management in survival situations is incredibly complex, and most people will make fatal miscalculations within days. First, you have no idea how many calories you actually need. Survival situations require significantly more energy than normal life. Cold weather, physical exertion, stress, and healing from injuries all increase caloric requirements dramatically. That can of beans you think will last 2 meals? It might not even meet your needs for one day. Water consumption becomes critical in ways you've never considered. You need water for drinking, cooking, cleaning wounds, and hygiene. In hot weather or when doing physical work, you can need a gallon per day just for drinking. Finding water is one challenge, but storing and transporting enough water for a group is logistically nightmarish. Ammunition management will get you killed. Movies make it seem like guns solve everything, but every shot you fire announces your location to every zombie and hostile human in the area. You'll burn through ammunition incredibly quickly in actual survival situations, and finding compatible ammo becomes nearly impossible once stores are looted. Fuel for vehicles, generators, and heating becomes a complex puzzle. Gas stations run dry quickly, and gasoline starts degrading after a few months. Propane, diesel, and other fuels all have different storage requirements and degradation timelines that most people don't understand. Medical supplies get used up faster than you'd expect. A simple cut requires bandages, antiseptic, and ongoing care. Larger injuries consume huge amounts of medical resources. Pain medication becomes incredibly valuable, but runs out quickly. Most people will hoard resources inefficiently, carrying too much of some things and not enough of others. They'll prioritize items based on perceived value rather than actual utility. They'll exhaust themselves carrying unnecessary weight while lacking essential supplies. Navigation. Your smartphone has made you navigationally helpless. You probably can't find your way across your own city without GPS assistance, but you think you'll be able to navigate during an apocalypse when all satellite service services are down, most people can't read paper maps effectively. They don't understand topographical maps, scale, or how to use a compass properly. They've never had to navigate by natural landmarks or celestial navigation. When your GPS stops working, you'll be lost within miles of your own home. Navigation becomes crucial in survival situations because getting lost means death. Wrong turns lead you into zombie hordes, hostile territory, or areas without resources. Getting lost in winter weather can kill you in hours. Taking inefficient routes wastes precious fuel and exposes you to unnecessary dangers. Even if you have paper maps, do you know how to determine your current location without GPS? Can you triangulate your position using landmarks? Do you understand how to account for magnetic declination when using a compass? Can you estimate distances traveled on foot across different terrain types? Natural navigation seems simple until you try it. Using the sun for direction requires understanding seasonal variations and time of day calculations. Star navigation requires clear skies and knowledge of specific constellations that change with seasons and geographic location. Both methods become useless in cloudy weather. Urban navigation during an apocalypse is completely different from normal times. Blocked roads, collapsed bridges, and dangerous areas change the entire layout of travel routes. The shortcuts you normally use might be death traps filled with zombies or controlled by hostile groups. You'll waste enormous amounts of time and resources being lost, and every hour spent going in circles is an hour closer to running out of food, water, or fuel. Navigation mistakes compound quickly and can turn manageable situations into fatal ones. Weapon maintenance. Everyone's apocalypse fantasy involves finding some awesome weapons and becoming a zombie-killing machine. Reality check. Weapons require constant maintenance, and you have no idea how to properly care for them. Firearms aren't toys that work forever without maintenance. They need regular cleaning, lubrication, and inspection to function reliably. Use a gun without proper maintenance and it will jam, misfire, or even explode in your hands when you need it most. Do you know how to field strip and clean different types of firearms? How often different weapons need maintenance based on usage and environmental conditions? Ammunition isn't just about having bullets. Different firearms require specific ammunition types, and using the wrong ammo can damage your weapon or cause dangerous misfires. Ammunition degrades over time, especially in poor storage conditions. Moisture, temperature fluctuations, and corrosion can make cartridges unreliable or completely useless. Bladed weapons need constant sharpening and maintenance. A dull knife or sword is not just less effective, it's dangerous to the user. Proper sharpening requires specific tools and techniques that most people have never learned. Edge geometry, sharpening angles, and steel hardness all affect how weapons should be maintained. Even simple weapons like baseball bats or crowbars can break or become damaged with heavy use. Wood splits, metal bends or cracks, and handles come loose. You'll need tools and materials to repair weapons, plus the knowledge of how to make those repairs properly. Environmental conditions will destroy weapons quickly. Rain causes rust, sand and dirt cause mechanical failures, and extreme temperatures affect metal properties. Storing weapons properly becomes crucial, but requires knowledge about moisture control, temperature stability, and proper positioning to prevent damage. You'll also need backup weapons because your primary weapons will inevitably break or get lost, but carrying multiple weapons means more weight, more maintenance requirements, and more complexity in an already difficult situation. Sleep deprivation. Sleep isn't optional. It's a biological necessity that becomes nearly impossible to fulfill during apocalypse survival. The combination of constant vigilance, uncomfortable conditions, and psychological stress will create a sleep deprivation cycle that severely impairs every aspect of survival. After just 24 hours without sleep, your reaction time slows significantly, your judgment becomes impaired, and your immune system starts weakening. After 48 hours, you'll start experiencing microsleeps, brief periods where your brain essentially shuts down for seconds at a time, even when you're trying to stay awake. In survival situations, you can't just find a comfortable bed and sleep for 8 hours. You need to maintain watch schedules, sleep in uncomfortable positions, and wake up frequently to check for threats. Light sleep means you're not getting the deep sleep phases necessary for physical and mental recovery. Temperature control affects sleep quality dramatically. Too hot and you can't fall asleep properly, too cold and you'll wake up constantly. You'll rarely have ideal sleeping conditions, which means you'll never get truly restorative sleep even when you have the opportunity. Stress and anxiety make quality sleep nearly impossible. Your brain will be constantly processing threats and planning survival strategies. Adrenaline from daily survival challenges will keep your nervous system in a state of hyperarousal that prevents deep sleep. Sleep-deprived people make terrible decisions. You'll miscalculate risks, miss important details, and react inappropriately to threats. That split-second decision about whether to fight or flee from zombies? Sleep deprivation makes you more likely likely to choose wrong and die because of it. Hallucinations from sleep deprivation can be deadly in survival situations. You might see threats that aren't there, wasting ammunition and revealing your position. Even worse, you might not see real threats because you're distracted by hallucinations. Group dynamics suffer when everyone is sleep-deprived and irritable. Arguments increase, cooperation decreases, and trust breaks down, all when teamwork is most essential for survival. If you thought all this was insane, the final three will make you question everything about your survival knowledge. Trust issues. Survival situations bring out both the best and worst in people, but mostly the worst. The people you'll encounter will be desperate, traumatized, and willing to do whatever it takes to survive. Learning who to trust becomes literally a matter of life and death, and most people are terrible at making these assessments under pressure. Other survivors will lie about their intentions, their resources, and their capabilities. They'll present themselves as friendly and helpful while planning to rob or abandon you when it becomes convenient. That family with children who seems trustworthy, they might be using the kids as bait to lower your guard before adult members of their group attack you. Groups will form alliances with you only as long as you're useful. The moment you become a liability, whether through injury, illness, or resource depletion, they'll cut you loose without hesitation. People who seem loyal and cooperative will turn on you immediately when survival requires it. But paranoia isn't the answer either, because complete isolation means certain death. You can't survive long-term without some form of cooperation with other people. You need others to maintain watch schedules, share resources, and provide backup during dangerous situations. The psychological challenge is determining which people pose genuine threats versus which ones are potential allies. Make the wrong choice, and you're dead. Trust too easily, and you'll be betrayed. Trust too little, and you'll miss opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. Information becomes a weapon in survival situations. Other survivors will lie about zombie movements, resource locations, and safe areas to gain advantages over you. They might send you into dangerous situations while avoiding those risks themselves. They might withhold critical information that could save your life because keeping you ignorant serves their interests. Even within established groups, internal conflicts will arise over resource allocation, decision-making authority, and risk assessment. These conflicts often escalate into violence that destroys groups from within, leaving everyone more vulnerable than they were alone. The stress of constant threat assessment will exhaust you mentally and emotionally. You'll become increasingly paranoid and hostile, which pushes away people who might actually help you. It's a psychological spiral that most people can't escape once it begins. Comfort zone. Your entire life has been spent in climate-controlled environments with comfortable furniture, predictable schedules, and immediate access to food, water, and entertainment. This comfortable lifestyle has made you psychologically and physically unprepared for the harsh realities of apocalypse survival. Extreme weather becomes a constant life-threatening challenge. You've probably never spent extended time outdoors in severe cold, heat, or storms. Your body isn't acclimated to temperature extremes, and you don't have the mental resilience to function effectively when physically uncomfortable. Sleeping on hard ground in cold weather will prevent you from getting rest, leading to the sleep deprivation cycle mentioned earlier. You'll spend enormous mental energy just dealing with discomfort, leaving less cognitive resources available for survival planning and threat assessment. Hunger affects your psychology in ways you've never experienced. Missing a meal makes you irritable and unfocused. Going days without adequate food makes you weak, confused, and desperate. True starvation creates a psychological state where rational decision-making becomes nearly impossible. You've never had to make life or death decisions under extreme physical and emotional stress. Your decision-making processes have been developed in low-stakes, comfortable environments. When survival depends on split-second choices while you're exhausted, hungry, and terrified, your comfortable life decision-making skills become useless. Personal hygiene becomes a complex survival challenge that affects both physical and mental health. You can't just take a hot shower whenever you want. Extended periods without proper cleaning lead to skin problems, dental issues, and psychological distress that compounds other survival challenges. Your entertainment and comfort needs will create dangerous cravings that compromise survival decisions. You'll take unnecessary risks to find books, games, alcohol, or other comfort items. You'll waste time and resources trying to recreate familiar comforts instead of focusing on essential survival tasks. The psychological adjustment to a harsh, uncomfortable reality will take weeks or months that you probably don't have. Most people will make fatal mistakes during this adjustment period because they can't adapt quickly enough to their new circumstances under pressure. All your zombie apocalypse planning has been done in comfortable, low-pressure environments with plenty of time to think through scenarios. Real survival situations involve making critical decisions in seconds while exhausted, terrified, and operating with incomplete information. Panic responses will override rational thinking at the worst possible moments. When confronted with immediate threats, your body's fight-or-flight response will flood your system with stress hormones that impair fine motor skills and rational decision-making. You'll freeze when you should run when you should hide, and fight when stealth would save your life. Information overload will paralyze your decision-making processes. In crisis situations, you'll be bombarded with sensory input, competing priorities, and multiple threats simultaneously. Your brain, which is used to processing information slowly and methodically, will simply shut down when overwhelmed. Time pressure creates a psychological state where people consistently make poor choices. That careful zombie apocalypse plan you developed over months of thought, you'll have 30 seconds to execute it while zombies are breaking down your door, and you'll forget half the steps while botching the other half. Risk assessment becomes nearly impossible under stress. You'll either become overly cautious, missing opportunities for escape or resource gathering, or overly reckless, taking unnecessary chances that get you killed. Finding the right balance requires experience with high-stakes decision-making that most people completely lack. Cognitive biases will distort your perception of threats and opportunities. Confirmation bias will make you see what you expect to see rather than what's actually there. Optimism bias will make you underestimate dangers. Availability bias will make recent events seem more likely to repeat than they actually are. Murphy's Law applies especially in survival situations. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible moment. Your backup plans will fail, your equipment will break, and circumstances will change in ways you never anticipated. Operating effectively when everything goes wrong requires mental flexibility that comfortable modern life never develops. Group decision-making under pressure becomes chaotic and ineffective. Everyone will have different opinions about the best course of action. Debates will waste precious time, and competing personalities will create conflicts that compromise everyone's survival chances. Everyone thinks they'd survive slow-moving zombies because they shamble at walking speed and headshots end them. From the relentless pursuit that wears you down to the psychological breaking points that turn survivors into threats worse than the undead, here's why you can't survive Walking Dead walkers. Starting with the one advantage zombies have that nobody talks about: relentless pursuit. Walkers don't get tired, ever. You do. That's the entire problem right there, wrapped up in two simple facts. In Night of the Living Dead from 1968, the first modern zombie movie that defined everything we know about these creatures, survivors hole up in a farmhouse thinking they can wait it out. The zombies shamble toward the house, slow and clumsy, looking like regular people in everyday clothes except for the pale skin and dead eyes. They claw at the doors and windows with the persistence of someone trying to open a jar lid for 6 hours straight. The survivors fortify, they board up windows, they think they're smart, but here's what happens. The zombies don't leave. They don't get bored and wander off. They just keep coming, hour after hour, until the humans inside start making mistakes from exhaustion and fear. One slip, one moment of letting your guard down because you haven't slept in 2 days, and suddenly they're pouring through a window you didn't reinforce properly. The movie showed audiences that slow doesn't mean harmless. It means inevitable. The film introduced ghouls that looked like your neighbors, dressed in the suits and dresses they died in, now stained and torn. They ate human flesh on screen. A shocking choice for 1960s cinema that made people walk out of theaters. One scene shows a ghoul eating bugs off a tree because it's just compulsively drawn to consuming anything. These aren't strategic hunters. They're biological machines programmed to pursue and devour. The survivors debate. They fight among themselves about the best plan, and while they're busy being human and complicated, the ghouls stay simple and focused. By the end, almost everyone's dead. Not because the zombies outsmarted them, but because humans can't maintain perfect vigilance forever. But here's the thing. If one farmhouse could hold off ghouls for a night despite mistakes, why not find a better fortress? Keep that question in mind, because the answer isn't what you think. Overwhelming numbers. Dawn of the Dead from 1978 took the concept and scaled it up to nightmare proportions. The survivors flee to a shopping mall, this massive complex with supplies and strong walls. Perfect refuge, right? Wrong. The zombies, now showing blue-gray skin tones and more detailed decay makeup, swarm the area. They're attracted to the mall like moths to a flame because that's where they used to shop when they were alive. The movie shows hundreds of them pressing against the glass doors, a sea of undead faces with blank expressions. The survivors manage to clear the interior and lock it down, living like kings surrounded by stores full of everything they need. For a while, it works. They're safe, they have food, they even play around on the abandoned merchandise. Then other humans show up, a biker gang, and the whole thing falls apart. The gang breaks through the defenses to raid the supplies, and in doing so, they let the zombies flood back in. Suddenly, the mall goes from secure fortress to death trap. The zombies pour through every opening, not running, but walking with arms outstretched, moaning that low grinding sound that echoes through empty corridors. What makes it terrifying isn't any individual zombie, it's watching them fill every space, every hallway, every store, until there's simply no room left to hide. The survivors try to fight their way out, but there are just too many bodies blocking every path. One character gets bitten during the chaos. Another gets torn apart by the horde. The movie features the sweater zombie and other memorable undead characters with distinct looks, each one just another body adding to the mass. The film works as social satire, not in showing zombies mindlessly returning to the consumer temple they worshipped in life, but it also demonstrates the core problem with slow zombies. Fight one and you attract 10 more with the noise. Fight 10 and 100 show up. Pretty soon you're trapped in a building surrounded by thousands, and no amount of supplies helps when you can't leave without getting swarmed. The walls that protected you become your tomb. What happens when you try to study them instead of just hiding? Because some people thought understanding walkers might be the key to survival. They were wrong, but what they discovered makes everything worse. Infection mechanics. Day of the Dead from 1985 moves the action to an underground bunker where military personnel and scientists are trying to figure out how the zombie plague works. The walkers above ground keep shambling around while below, researchers dissect bodies and run experiments. Dr. Logan, nicknamed Frankenstein by the soldiers, attempts to domesticate a zombie named Bub. Bub's special. He shows signs of memory, recognizing a razor and remembering how to salute. The doctor thinks maybe intelligence survives death, that the undead can be trained. It's the closest anyone gets to a breakthrough in the entire franchise. The experiments reveal the harsh truth about infection. Get bitten, and you're done. Within hours, you develop fever, you deteriorate, you die, and then you come back as one of them. Amputation might work if you cut off the bitten limb immediately, but you need proper medical equipment and sterile conditions. In a bunker filled with tension and dwindling resources, those conditions don't exist. One soldier gets bitten and they try to save him, but he turns anyway, attacking his former comrades. The movie shows in graphic detail what happens during transformation. The sweating, the convulsions, the moment when the person you knew disappears and something else takes over their body. But infection isn't just from bites. Everyone's already infected. Die from any cause. Heart attack, accident, old age, and you reanimate unless your brain gets destroyed. That revelation changes everything. It means every human death creates a new threat. Your friend has a heart condition? Future zombie. Someone falls downstairs? Future zombie. Natural death doesn't exist anymore. There's only death that makes more walkers. The bunker survivors turn on each other, soldiers versus scientists, fighting over resources and control while the zombies wait patiently above ground. When the conflicts lead to deaths inside the facility, those bodies get up and create chaos from within. You can fortify against external threats all you want, but you can't fortify against your own mortality. Bub eventually shows emotion, mourning for Dr. Logan and using a pistol to shoot the soldier who killed him. It's a glimmer of retained humanity, but it doesn't change the fundamental problem. The vast majority of walkers are mindless flesh eaters, and the infection guarantees their numbers always grow while human numbers always shrink. So if infection turns everyone into walkers, why not just avoid getting bitten and die of old age somewhere safe? Because there's no such thing as safe when society collapses, and that's where the real horror lives. Societal breakdown. Shaun of the Dead from 2004 plays the apocalypse for comedy, but still captures how fast civilization crumbles. The movie follows Shaun, an average guy dealing with relationship problems when zombies start appearing in London. At first, people don't even notice. The undead shamble down streets and everyone assumes they're drunk or on drugs. By the time society realizes what's happening, it's too late. Supply chains break immediately. Stores run out of food within days. Gas stations close. Power grids fail. The movie shows this through Shaun's attempts to save his loved ones, running through a city that's rapidly falling apart. The zombies themselves fill the streets in massive crowds, moaning and reaching for anything living. They're slow enough that Shaun and his friends can temporarily evade them by walking briskly, but there are so many that every route becomes a navigation puzzle. The group holes up in a pub called the Winchester, fortifying it with pool cues and furniture. The pub siege demonstrates another survival problem. Even if you find shelter, you need an exit strategy. They're surrounded, ammunition runs low, and the walkers just keep pressing against the building. The horde includes random zombies that look like everyday British citizens, and the movie even jokes about celebrity cameos in the undead crowds. One zombie is Sean's former roommate Ed, who becomes a sentient zombie kept in the shed for playing video games. The film shows how human conflicts complicate survival. Sean argues with his stepfather, his friend David questions every decision, and his girlfriend Liz loses faith in his leadership. While they're bickering about the plan, zombies are climbing through windows. The movie uses humor to highlight a serious point. Humans are their own worst enemies during catastrophes. We form groups, but then fracture over disagreements about who's in charge or which direction to go. Meanwhile, walkers have perfect unity, because they only have one goal. No walker ever stopped mid-chase to argue about tactics. The epilogue reveals society adapting to coexist with zombies. Some get used for menial labor, others appear on game shows, and Sean keeps Zombie Ed chained in his shed for entertainment. It's a dark comedy ending, but it acknowledges something real. The world doesn't end cleanly. It becomes something stranger and worse, where the living have to navigate around the shambling dead like permanent hazards. But Britain isn't America. A different place, different outbreak. What happens when the zombie plague hits a culture obsessed with apocalypse preparation? The answer is grimmer than you'd expect. American Decline. The Dead Don't Die from 2019 sets its zombie outbreak in a small American town called Centerville. The zombies rise due to polar fracking throwing Earth off its axis, an environmental disaster metaphor wrapped in horror. The undead emerge from graves speaking single words related to their past obsessions. Coffee zombie moans, coffee, guitar zombie mumbles about his instrument. They retain these tiny fragments of who they were while being completely driven by hunger. The movie presents them as ambling corpses with pale skin and hollow eyes, wandering the streets at night, attacking anyone they encounter. The police force, led by Chief Cliff Robertson, Ajin tries to maintain order as the dead multiply. They shoot zombies in the head, the only method that works, but every night brings more rising from the cemetery. The town's isolation means no outside help is coming. Resources deplete quickly, and panic spreads. The film plays out like watching society give up. Characters deliver deadpan dialogue about their impending doom while zombies tear apart victims in graphic scenes. A child zombie appears, showing that the outbreak doesn't discriminate by age. The horror comes from the characters' resignation. They know they can't win. They know this is how humanity ends, and they just go through the motions anyway. What makes this outbreak particularly hopeless is the environmental cause. You can't fix Earth's axis. You can't reverse polar fracking's effects. The dead will keep rising every single night forever. Some characters try to escape, but there's nowhere to go. The phenomenon is global. The movie ends with most of the cast dead and reanimated, joining the shambling hordes. It's apocalypse's inevitable conclusion rather than survivable crisis. The walkers here aren't even the main threat. They're symptoms of humanity's larger failure to respect natural systems. But symptoms or not, they still tear people apart with decayed hands and rotten teeth. Every outbreak follows patterns. Rural or urban, American or British, the result stays the same. But what about when walkers encounter specific vulnerable populations? Because the worst scenarios involve those who can't defend themselves. Children at risk. The Little Monsters from 2019 puts zombies in proximity to a kindergarten class on a field trip. The outbreak occurs at a petting zoo farm when infected Americans from a nearby military facility escape and spread into the area. Miss Caroline, the teacher, tries to protect her students, while zombies overrun the farm. The children are too young to understand what's happening, so she pretends it's a game. The undead follow the sound of music, drawn to her ukulele playing, shambling after the group with arms outstretched. The movie highlights the impossibility of protecting vulnerable populations during outbreak scenarios. Children can't run fast. They don't understand danger. They make noise constantly. Keeping a dozen kindergartners quiet and moving while zombies hunt them is an impossible task. Miss Caroline manages temporarily through quick thinking and luck, but it's unsustainable. One child wanders off and nearly gets bitten. Another starts crying and attracts walkers. The zombies themselves aren't described in detail, but function as standard slow undead. Gray skin, shambling movement, kills through bites and scratches. Military intervention arrives, but it's too late to prevent casualties. The facility breach means the infection is already spreading beyond containment. The farm setting shows how rural areas offer no safety advantage. Fewer zombies, maybe, but also fewer resources and no reinforcements. Miss Caroline's heroism saves most of the kids, but the broader implication is clear. In a real outbreak, schools become death traps. Hospitals full of patients who can't evacuate become hives. Our nursing homes turn into slow-motion massacres. Any location with people who need assistance becomes impossible to defend because walkers are patient and caretakers are human. The infection spreads through scratches, too, not just bites, making every physical contact potentially fatal. One scratch from a walker's fingernail breaking skin and you're infected. You've got hours before fever takes you. Then, you're one of them. In a group with children, the ethical nightmare compounds. Do you abandon an infected child? Do you waste resources trying to save them? Do you mercy kill? The movie doesn't answer these questions because there are no good answers. Which brings us to the real killer in zombie outbreaks. Not the undead, the psychological weight of impossible choices, mental collapse. And the slow approach of walkers creates unique psychological torture. Fast zombies sprint at you and it's over quick. Terror then death. Slow zombies give you time to think about your situation, time to watch them shuffle closer, time to count how many are surrounding your position, time to realize you're going to die slowly, probably by being eaten alive while conscious. That waiting builds dread in ways sudden threats don't. Night of the Living Dead weaponizes this through pacing, showing characters watching through windows as ghouls slowly congregate outside. The characters argue, blame each other, make increasingly desperate plans. The stress fractures the group until they're fighting each other more than coordinating defense. Barbara, the female protagonist, goes catatonic from fear after watching zombies kill her brother, and she sits in shock while chaos unfolds around her, unable to process the horror. Other characters debate whether to hide in the cellar or stay upstairs, a disagreement that turns violent. Ben, the black protagonist, tries to maintain leadership, but faces constant challenges from Harry, another survivor who thinks he knows better. Their conflict culminates in physical fighting while ghouls break through the barricades. Harry's selfishness gets people killed. Ben's mistrust leads to fatal hesitation. Everyone's decision-making deteriorates under sustained stress. The movie ends with Ben surviving the night only to be shot by a rescue posse who mistakes him for a zombie. After everything he endured, after fighting off the undead for hours, a human kills him because of a split-second judgment call. That's the psychological thesis of walker outbreaks. The slow zombies aren't what destroy you. The prolonged stress, the moral dilemmas, the human conflicts, the crushing weight of trying to maintain humanity while surrounded by death, that's what breaks people. The walkers just finish what fear and exhaustion started. Dawn of the Dead explores this through the mall survivor's arc. Initially, they're thrilled with their fortress. They have everything they could want materially. But being surrounded by hundreds of zombies wears on them mentally. They start taking risks, making stupid decisions born from boredom and cabin fever. When the bikers attack, survivors make tactical errors because they're not thinking clearly anymore. Stress accumulates like radiation poisoning, invisible but deadly. You don't notice it degrading your judgment until you've already made the fatal mistake. Day of the Dead takes it further into outright madness. The bunker survivors are at each other's throats constantly. Soldiers threatening scientists. Scientists calling soldiers stupid brutes. The isolation combined with the knowledge that they're probably the last humans alive creates paranoia and aggression. Captain Rhodes becomes increasingly unhinged, threatening to execute people over minor disagreements. The stress of living underground with limited resources and unlimited zombies overhead breaks military discipline completely. When the bunker is breached and zombies flood in, people die as much from panic and friendly fire as from walker attacks. The mental toll explains why every zombie movie shows society collapsing completely within weeks. It's not that humans can't physically defeat slow zombies. We have guns, explosions, and fortifications. It's that we can't psychologically sustain the effort. We break under pressure. We turn on each other. We make fatal errors because our brains aren't designed for constant existential threat. Walkers exploit the weakness of human psychology simply by existing. And if mental stress doesn't kill you, the environment will, because choosing where to hide determines how you die. Location selection. Urban areas become death zones fast. Dawn of the Dead's mall demonstrates why. High population density means more zombies. Cities have millions of people who all turn when they die, creating oceans of undead that flood every street. The survivors navigate the mall's parking lot through thousands of walkers, driving vehicles into the crowd to clear paths. The sheer number makes escape nearly impossible. You can't sneak through a horde that dense, you can't fight that many even with automatic weapons, you'll run out of ammunition before they run out of bodies. The mall itself seems perfect with its supplies and security, but it's a trap. The moment you're surrounded, you can't leave without fighting through the horde. Noise from daily activities attracts more zombies. Breaking glass, gunfire, even loud conversations draw them. The building becomes a beacon broadcasting your location to every walker within hearing distance. The survivors can't use generators without creating noise. They can't drive vehicles without attracting attention. Every survival action that requires sound brings more undead to the perimeter. Rural settings offer different problems. Night of the Living Dead's farmhouse has fewer zombies nearby initially, but it's also isolated from help. No reinforcements are coming. You're on your own with whatever supplies you already have. The farmhouse provides some security through its wooden walls and limited entry points, but rural buildings aren't built to withstand sieges. The ghouls break through eventually because farmhouse construction doesn't include zombie-proof fortification. Rural areas also mean limited supplies nearby. Urban survivors can potentially raid stores and warehouses. Rural survivors have to travel distances between resources, each trip exposing them to walker attacks. The farmhouse group runs out of options quickly because there's nothing around them except fields and more approaching ghouls. Your distance from other survivors means no trading, no intelligence about safe zones, no collaborative defense. The Dead Don't Die shows small-town isolation turning deadly. Centerville has maybe a few thousand people, so fewer zombies than a city, but it also has minimal resources for fighting an outbreak. A couple of cops, no military presence, limited medical supplies. When zombies overrun the town, there's no defense infrastructure. The police station becomes a last-stand location, but it's not designed as a fortress. Windows break easily, doors aren't reinforced. The characters make their stand knowing they're doomed because the building can't hold. Islands seem like the obvious answer. Limited access points, surrounded by water that walkers theoretically can't cross. Survival of the Dead from 2009 explores this with an island community that's feuding over how to handle their undead. Turns out, even islands fail because you still need supplies from the mainland. You still have to deal with infected people already on the island. You still face human conflicts that create internal threats. And depending on the water depth and current, walkers might just walk along the ocean floor until they reach shore. They don't need to breathe. Every location has fatal flaws. Urban areas have too many zombies. Rural areas have too few resources. Islands trap you. Mountains are hard to farm. Bunkers run out of supplies. There's no perfect refuge because walker outbreaks don't allow for perfect solutions. Any place you choose to hide becomes your tomb eventually. But what if you don't hide? What if you try to fight back and reclaim territory? Because some people always think they can win through force. Failed militarization. Day of the Dead shows military response failing catastrophically. The bunker houses soldiers with weapons, ammunition, and training. They should be able to handle zombies. They're trained to kill enemy combatants, and walkers are slower than any human enemy. But the military mindset doesn't work against undead. Soldiers are trained to take and hold strategic positions. But there's no strategic position against zombies because they don't have supply lines to cut or command structures to decapitate. You can't negotiate with them or demoralize them into surrendering. The bunker soldiers waste ammunition shooting zombies that could be avoided. They treat it like a war when it's a survival situation requiring different tactics. Captain Rhodes insists on military hierarchy and authority, while that structure actively prevents flexible problem solving. When Dr. Logan proposes studying zombies to understand them, Rhodes sees it as weakness. When scientists suggest communication might be possible with specimens like Bub, Rhodes wants to just shoot everything that moves. The rigid military thinking can't adapt to a threat that breaks all conventional warfare rules. The soldiers also make the mistake of treating scientists as subordinates rather than essential personnel. They bully the researchers, threaten them, create a hostile environment that prevents collaboration. When you're in an underground bunker as possibly the last humans alive, forming teams and sharing knowledge is survival 101. Instead, the soldiers hoard resources and assert dominance, fragmenting the group's effectiveness. Their military training becomes a liability because they apply irrelevant tactical frameworks to an unprecedented situation. Land of the Dead from 2005 shows what happens when military force builds a walled city. The survivors create Fiddler's Green, a fortified zone protected by rivers and barriers with soldiers patrolling the perimeter. They've reclaimed some territory and established a functioning society for the wealthy, while the poor live in slums outside the fortress. The military ventures out in armored vehicles to raid supplies, fighting through zombie hordes with machine guns and explosives. For a while it works. They maintain maintain their territory and keep the undead at bay. Then the zombies evolve. A walker named Big Daddy shows intelligence, learning to use tools and organizing other zombies. He leads a horde across the river by walking along the bottom and breaches the city's defenses. All the military planning and fortification fails because it assumed walkers would stay mindless. The moment they adapt even slightly, static defenses become obsolete. The armored vehicles get overwhelmed, the walls get bypassed, and Fiddler's Green falls. Military might delays the inevitable, but can't prevent it. The fundamental problem is ammunition and resources. Militaries need supply chains for bullets, fuel, parts, and food. When society collapses, those chains break. The bunker in Day of the Dead runs low on everything. The city in Land of the Dead has to keep raiding for supplies, risking people on every mission. Eventually, you run out. Out of bullets, out of fuel, out of people willing to die for another supply run. Walkers don't run out. They don't need supplies. Every human death adds to their numbers, while every zombie death barely dents the horde. Military response fails for the same reason all organized resistance fails. It requires sustained resources and coordination against an enemy that requires neither. You can win battles, but you lose the war of attrition. And when the military falls, civilian survival becomes even more hopeless, which loops back to the core thesis. You can't survive walkers because every survival strategy has a fatal flaw. Compounding failures. Fortification traps you. Mobility exposes you. Hiding delays death. Fighting wastes resources. Cooperation leads to betrayal. Isolation leads to madness. Every choice you make in a walker outbreak trades one danger for another without eliminating risk. Night of the Living Dead's survivors fortify and die when defenses fail. Dawn of the Dead's survivors hide and die when they can't escape. Day of the Dead's survivors study and die when they turn on each other. The pattern repeats across every scenario because there's no right answer. The infection guarantees you can't rebuild population. Every death creates an enemy. You can't have children safely because pregnant women and infants are completely vulnerable. You can't treat the elderly or sick because they'll turn when they die naturally. Communities can't grow, they only shrink. Each loss is permanent, while walker numbers constantly increase. The math doesn't work. Even if you kill 1,000 zombies, more are being created from natural deaths everywhere. You're bailing water from a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Resource depletion ensures long-term survival is impossible. Canned food expires. Medicine degrades. Ammunition runs out. Crops need protection from walkers. Clean water requires infrastructure that breaks down. Gasoline goes bad after a year. Solar panels fail without maintenance. Everything you need to survive has a shelf life, or requires systems you can't maintain alone. Dawn of the Dead shows this through the mall. All those supplies seem infinite until you realize they're finite and irreplaceable. Once you eat all the canned food, there's no more. Once you fire all the bullets, there's no factory making more. Human nature prevents cooperation at scale. Naisha small groups might work temporarily, but larger organizations always fracture. Resources create conflicts over distribution. Different survival philosophies clash. Some people want to hide, others want to fight, others want to find a cure. These disagreements turn violent under stress. Every zombie movie includes scenes of humans killing each other because that's what happens when you put desperate people in competition for scarce resources. The zombies don't have to defeat you. They just have to apply enough pressure that you defeat yourself. The psychological toll breaks everyone eventually. You can be strong, capable, and smart, but months or years of constant vigilance will erode your sanity. You'll start making mistakes. You'll develop PTSD from watching friends die. You'll lose hope and make decisions like Barbara's catatonia or Rhodes's paranoia. The human mind isn't designed for endless apocalypse. We need safety and rest and normalcy. Walkers remove all three permanently. You exist in permanent crisis until crisis breaks you. Shaun of the Dead's epilogue shows the darkly realistic outcome. Society doesn't defeat zombies or get defeated by them. It adapts to coexist in a degraded state where the undead are just permanent hazards you navigate around. Zombies on game shows. Zombies doing menial labor. Zombies in your shed. It's survival, but not victory. It's humanity reduced to managing an infestation it can't eliminate, accepting a world that's permanently worse. That's probably the best case scenario, and it's still a nightmare. The evidence across every Walker film points to the same conclusion. Whether it's radiation from space, mysterious plague, or environmental disaster causing the outbreak, whether it's rural farmhouses or urban malls or military bunkers, whether the survivors are civilians or soldiers or scientists, the result is always civilizational collapse and mass death. Slow zombies create unsolvable problems. Their persistence overwhelms defenses. Their infection spreads faster than it can be contained. Their numbers grow while human numbers shrink. The psychological pressure breaks group cohesion. Resource scarcity makes long-term survival impossible. You can't win through violence because there are too many to kill. You can't win through hiding because you run out of supplies. You can't win through cooperation because humans turn on each other under pressure. You can't cure the infection because the infrastructure needed for medical research collapses. You can't escape because the outbreak is global. Every path leads to the same destination. You become one of them, or you die trying not to. The walkers in these films represent something fundamental about mortality and entropy, their death-given form, shambling forward with absolute certainty. You can delay them, evade them temporarily, but they never stop coming. They're the universe's heat death made visceral, slow, inevitable, unstoppable. Every moment you survive is just postponing the conclusion. The farmhouse falls, the mall falls, the bunker falls, the city falls. Everything falls because that's what walkers do. They don't conquer, they persist until everything else collapses from exhaustion. And that's why you can't survive them. Not because they're stronger or faster or smarter than you, because they don't need to be. They just need to keep existing while you slowly run out of ammunition, food, sanity, and allies. They embody the only certainty in life, that everything ends. Your fortifications will fail. Your supplies will deplete. Your mind will break. Your group will fracture. Your luck will run out. The walkers will still be there, shuffling forward, reaching out with decayed hands, waiting for the moment you make your final mistake. You've probably thought about surviving a zombie apocalypse because it is such an interesting topic to think and talk about. That's why today I'm breaking down why you would never be able to survive World War Z zombies. From 12-second infections to swarms that scale 100-foot walls, starting with the one thing that makes every other zombie look harmless: outbreak speed. The zombies in World War Z sprint at full speed the second they detect you, and they turn victims in 12 seconds flat. In the 2013 film, Jerry Lane times this transformation during the Philadelphia outbreak. A healthy person gets bitten, thrashes for a few seconds, dies, and snaps back up as a sprinting infected before you can process what happened. This is exponential spread happening faster than any response team can mobilize. One infected in a crowded street becomes 10 in 2 minutes, becomes 100 in 5, becomes an unstoppable wave before the military gets the call. Cities collapse in real time because the infection moves faster than information, faster than evacuation orders, faster than anything humanity has ever faced. Max Brooks' 2006 novel uses slow-moving zombies, but the movie threw that out. Director Mark Forster wanted visceral panic, making these things Olympic sprinters with zero fatigue. You can't outrun them, can't outlast them, barely have time to understand what's happening before your neighborhood is overrun. But speed is just the beginning. What comes next is where World War Z zombies break physics itself: the swarm. These zombies form massive, coordinated swarms that function like a single organism, piling their bodies into human pyramids to scale impossible walls. The Jerusalem sequence demonstrates this horrifyingly well. Israel has built massive concrete walls around the city. The refugees inside start celebrating, and the noise draws zombies from miles around. The infected don't claw uselessly at the wall base. They run full speed and leap onto each other, building a writhing pyramid of bodies that gains height with every zombie that joins. Within minutes, they've created a living ladder tall enough to pour over the top. The CGI team used over 5,000 individually animated zombies for this scene. The wall doesn't fall because of structural weakness, it falls because the zombies turn themselves into siege equipment. This behavior appears throughout the film. In South Korea, they pile up to reach second-story windows. On the airplane, they swarm through the cabin in a coordinated wave. The 2019 video game introduces special infected variants like bulls that charge through defenses and screamers that call in swarms. Even with automatic weapons and explosives, players get overrun without teamwork. Traditional zombie defense relies on choke points and barriers. World War Z zombies don't respect choke points. They flow over and around obstacles like water, using their bodies as disposable tools. The film never shows a successful static defense. Every fortification falls. Every barrier gets overrun. The only survivors kept moving or stayed completely silent. So walls don't work and barriers fail. Here's the next problem. These zombies have hearing that shouldn't be possible. Sound sensitivity. Every noise you make is a dinner bell, and these zombies hear from distances that shouldn't be possible. The film establishes this early in Philadelphia. Jerry's family is hiding when a neighbor's phone starts ringing. Within seconds, infected are throwing themselves against the door. In Jerusalem, it's not the walls that doom the city, it's the celebration. People singing creates a sound beacon that attracts every zombie within miles. the infected screech to alert others, creating a chain reaction that brings thousands converging on one location. The game takes this further with screamers that call reinforcements with ear-splitting shrieks. Kill them quietly, or face an endless horde. This means you can't use guns except as a last resort. Every shot brings more infected than you killed. You can't drive vehicles because engines are too loud. You can't live in groups because people make noise just existing. Noise discipline in an apocalypse isn't just hard, it's essentially impossible for anyone who isn't trained special forces. Silence keeps you alive, but only until someone near you makes a mistake. And when they do, you've got 12 seconds before that mistake becomes your problem. Infection method. Getting bitten is a death sentence that executes in 12 seconds, but it's not just bites. The virus spreads through any fluid contact. When someone gets bitten, dark veins spread from the wound almost instantly. Their eyes cloud over, skin goes pale, and they convulse as the virus kills them and takes over. Jerry times it at 12 seconds from bite to reanimation. The game extends this to up to a minute, but the principle remains. Fast infection means exponential growth that outpaces containment. The real nightmare is secondary transmission. Zombies secrete a black tar-like substance loaded with virus. Get it in your eyes, mouth, or an open wound, and you're infected just as surely as a bite. The game's Infector variant weaponizes this by spitting infected bile at range. This makes melee combat suicidal. You can't wrestle a zombie without getting covered in fluids. The only safe way to kill them is headshots from distance, but that brings back the noise problem. Every safe method creates more danger through sound. The film shows characters amputating bitten limbs to stop spread, and even that only works if you beat the 12-second clock. 12 seconds from bite to zombie, fluids everywhere, and one scratch ends you. But the movie shows people walking right past zombies untouched. How? Selective targeting. These zombies ignore the sick, dying, and terminally ill. They're not stupid, they're efficient. Jerry discovers this through observation during his investigation. An old man and malnourished boy walk right past zombies without being attacked. The infected sniff them, screech, and move on, looking for healthier targets. Later, at the WHO facility in Wales, Jerry tests this by injecting himself with a pathogen that mimics terminal illness. He walks through a room full of zombies completely undetected. The virus has evolved to avoid hosts that won't make good spreaders. This leads to a camouflage vaccine that makes people invisible to infected by mimicking disease markers. The WHO starts mass producing it, giving survivors a way to move through zombie territory. But here's why this doesn't save you. First, you need access to deadly pathogens and a functioning medical research facility with high-level containment. Second, you're deliberately making yourself sick. Gambling, you got the dosage right. Too little and zombies still attack. Too much and you've given yourself a fatal disease. Third, this only works if you know about it, and Jerry only figured it out after visiting multiple continents and observing thousands of infected. The novel's zombies don't show this selective behavior at all. The film added this to give humanity a fighting chance, but it's a solution that requires global infrastructure that's already collapsed. So there's a camouflage trick that works if you can inject yourself with terminal illnesses in a collapsing world. Totally practical. But even if you pulled that off, there's one biological advantage zombies have that makes outrunning them a fantasy: no fatigue. These things run at sprint speed indefinitely. They don't get tired, don't slow down, don't need rest, food, or breaks. They just keep coming until destroyed. The film never shows an infected running out of energy. During the plane sequence, infected chase survivors for minutes without any decrease in speed or aggression. In Jerusalem, the zombies piling up the wall have been running and climbing for who knows how long, still moving at full capacity when they breach the top. The game reflects this by making zombie spawns essentially infinite. Humans do get tired. You can sprint for maybe 30 seconds before gasping. Every survivor in the film gets winded. The zombies never do. This creates simple math. In any extended chase, the zombies win because they can maintain pursuit longer than you can maintain escape. The novel's zombies shamble slowly but never stop, creating situations where humans hold them off for hours or days until ammunition runs out or exhaustion causes mistakes. The film's zombies collapse that timeline from days to minutes. You don't get to rest between waves because there are no waves. It's one continuous assault. This is why every successful survival moment involves either complete concealment or vehicles. Jerry's family survives by getting to a ship offshore. Jerusalem survives while the walls keep infected out. The WHO facility stays secure because it's isolated with strict noise discipline. Nobody survives by outrunning zombies long term. You survive by not being chased in the first place. They never stop, they never tire, and you do. Fine. so you can't outrun them. Just shoot them, problem solved. Except there's only one way to put them down. Headshot only. Destroying the brain is the only way to stop them permanently. And in the chaos of a swarm, landing headshots is nearly impossible for anyone who isn't a trained marksman. The film demonstrates this repeatedly. Characters who shoot center mass might knock a zombie down temporarily, but it gets back up. Only head trauma stops them for good. The game makes this a core mechanic where headshots deal massive damage while body shots barely slow special infected variants. A bull can soak a dozen body shots and keep coming, but one well-placed headshot drops it instantly. The problem is hitting a moving head under pressure. Zombies sprint erratically, leap, climb, and pile on each other. You're not shooting at a stationary target. You're shooting at something moving faster than you while probably also moving yourself, possibly in the dark, definitely while panicking. Even trained soldiers struggle. The film shows military units getting overwhelmed despite superior firepower. This makes ammunition conservation impossible. In a traditional zombie scenario with slow targets, you might score headshots with reasonable reliability. Against World War Z zombies, you're lucky to hit the target at all. You burn through ammunition at an unsustainable rate. The game reflects this through ammo economy, where even with team coordination, players run dry and have to resort to melee weapons, which brings back all the infection risks. Headshots only, on sprinting targets. In a swarm, your odds are terrible, and that's just in your neighborhood. What happened next turned the entire planet into a graveyard in under a week. Global spread. The infection went worldwide in days because it spread faster than information, and modern air travel turned every international airport into a distribution hub for the apocalypse. Patient Zero likely originated in Asia, but by the time anyone identified it as a threat, infected people had already boarded international flights. A single infected passenger turning mid-flight creates chaos that crashes the plane or diverts it to an airport where everyone scatters into a new city. Each new city becomes a new outbreak point. Each outbreak reaches critical mass in hours. The 12-second incubation means someone can get infected, board a plane, and spread the virus to a new continent before showing symptoms. South Korea's Camp Humphreys illustrates this. The base physician returning from assignment brings the infection. Within hours, the entire military installation is overrun. This isn't a slow creep from one region. It's simultaneous global ignition. The game sets missions in multiple cities across continents. New York, Jerusalem, Moscow, Tokyo, each facing identical outbreaks. There are no safe continents. The novel handles this more gradually, with infections starting in China and spreading over months, allowing for information spread and containment efforts that slow but don't stop it. The film's version is insurmountable because it removes preparation time. By the time world leaders understand what they're facing, the virus has already seeded itself in every major population center. The few governments that respond quickly, like Israel, buy time with walls and quarantines, but even they fall eventually. You don't get to see what happened in other regions and prepare. You get attacked out of nowhere by a threat you don't understand. Every continent, every major city, all simultaneously overrun before governments understood the threat. You'd think something spreading that fast would be mindless. That's what makes the next part so terrifying. Virus intelligence. The infection doesn't just reanimate corpses randomly. It drives infected towards specific behaviors that maximize spread, almost like the virus has strategic objectives. Selective targeting of healthy hosts proves this. A mindless reanimation shouldn't distinguish between terminal illness and health. That requires the virus to somehow assess host viability and make targeting decisions. Zombies bypass the sick and swarm the healthy with frightening consistency. This suggests the virus has evolved or been engineered with propagation as the primary directive. The swarming behavior supports this. Individual infected coordinate without communication to build human pyramids. They don't fight each other for victims or waste energy on non-viable targets. Everything serves transmission efficiency. During the plane sequence, infected move methodically toward survivors, using numbers and speed to corner targets. The game's special variants serve specific tactical purposes in overwhelming defenses. Some fan theories suggest bioweapon origins, which would explain strategic behaviors. The novel's Solanum virus has mysterious origins linked to Chinese cover-ups. The film keeps the source ambiguous. Practically, you're not fighting mindless zombies. You're fighting a distributed intelligence that uses human bodies as drones. It adapts to defenses by overwhelming them with numbers. It avoids wasting resources on poor hosts. Every traditional strategy assumes you're fighting stupid enemies. These enemies might not be conscious, but the virus driving them is ruthlessly efficient. The virus is optimizing, coordinating thousands of bodies like a distributed computer network. Sounds unbeatable, and it is, almost everywhere. But there's one environment where they slow down: cold weakness. Extreme cold slows them significantly, which sounds like a major advantage until you realize how few people live in regions cold enough to matter, and how hard surviving there becomes, even without zombies. The film reveals this when Jerry observes zombies in cold climates moving sluggishly, almost frozen in winter conditions. The virus can't maintain full motor function at low temperatures. The novel explores this with survivors in northern Canada using winter as a defensive advantage. Frozen zombies become stationary obstacles, but translating this to survival strategy runs into hard reality. First, most of humanity doesn't live in Arctic conditions. The initial outbreak happens in temperate and tropical zones where billions are concentrated. By the time you could flee north, infection has achieved critical mass globally. Second, surviving in extreme cold requires gear, shelter, and food supplies that are hard to maintain without industrial support. You're trading fast zombies for hypothermia, frostbite, and starvation. Third, cold is seasonal in most places. Even if you survive one winter using frozen zombies as an advantage, what happens when temperatures rise and they all thaw simultaneously? The film suggests this creates a secondary spring crisis. And finally, cold only slows them, doesn't kill them. A frozen zombie is easier to approach and finish, but you're still doing manual labor in sub-zero temperatures against thousands of targets. The few regions where this works long-term, northern Greenland, Siberia, Antarctica, are so consistently cold that zombies can't function, and so isolated that initial infection barely reaches them. But those are also areas with minimal populations and no infrastructure to support refugees. Cold slows them but doesn't stop them, and most of humanity doesn't live in the Arctic. So what if you get bitten? The movie shows someone surviving. There's a trick, but the timing is insane. Bite amputation. Cutting off a bitten limb before infection spreads is theoretically possible given the 12-second window, but practically requires tools, skill, pain tolerance, and luck most people don't have. The film shows this once. A soldier gets bitten on the hand, and his teammate immediately hacks it off. The soldier survives without turning because they beat the clock. The game allows players to heal infected teammates if treated fast enough, implying similar emergency amputation tactics. But think about what this requires. You need a sharp blade capable of severing bone in 1 or 2 strikes. You need someone willing to perform amputation immediately without hesitation. You need the victim to stay still despite incredible pain. You need something to stop the bleeding, or the person dies from blood loss. And you need all this within 12 seconds, which means noticing the bite instantly, deciding on amputation instantly, and executing perfectly under pressure. The odds are basically zero. Most people freeze when injured. Most don't carry amputation tools or know battlefield medicine. And most bites happen during chaotic swarm attacks where you're lucky to even realize you've been bitten before you've turned. The film only shows successful amputation once with a trained military unit. Every other bite victim turns. Cut off the limb in 12 seconds and you live. Miss that window by 2 seconds and you're dead. Sounds extreme, but at least the military has training and firepower. Surely they'd handle this better. Watch what actually happens. Military failure. Conventional armed forces with artillery, armor, and air support get overrun repeatedly, proving that firepower alone can't stop exponential spread backed by suicidal swarm tactics. The Philadelphia outbreak shows police and National Guard units deploying with standard riot control tactics. They set up barricades, try to maintain order, and get overwhelmed in minutes. Zombies don't respect police lines. They charge straight through, convert officers with a single bite, and the defensive line becomes part of the swarm. Later sequences show full military deployments with heavy weapons failing just as badly. The issue isn't firepower, it's the nature of the enemy. Military doctrine assumes enemies that take cover, value their lives, and can be suppressed. Zombies don't take cover or value anything. You can mow down 100 with machine gun fire and the next 100 climb over the bodies without slowing. Unless every single one is killed with a headshot, they keep coming. The novel details battles like Yonkers, where the US military uses combined arms tactics against slow zombies and still gets routed because they run out of ammunition before running out of targets. The film's fast zombies make this worse by closing the distance before heavy weapons can be deployed. What breaks the military isn't lack of courage or training, it's math. You can't shoot faster than the infection spreads. One infected soldier becomes 10, becomes 100, and each one is now armed with military weapons and knowledge of base layouts. The conversion speed turns your own forces against you faster than you can evacuate. Tanks, helicopters, trained soldiers with automatic weapons, all overrun. The military collapses faster than civilian populations because they fight back, and fighting makes noise. Speaking of noise, there's a feedback loop that turns one mistake into a citywide death sentence. noise amplification. Zombies don't just hear noise. They screech to alert others when they detect something, creating a chain reaction that summons every infected within miles. One zombie spots a survivor, lets out that distinctive clicking screech, and suddenly, dozens more appear. The sound carries. Other zombies hear it and add their own shrieks, and the signal propagates like a biological alarm system. In Jerusalem, this creates a feedback loop where initial singing draws zombies. Their screeching draws more, and within minutes, the entire city is surrounded by thousands converging on the wall. The game makes this explicit through the Screamer variant. Kill it before it finishes its shriek or face massive reinforcements. The novel doesn't feature this specific mechanic, but describes zombies responding to each other's presence, creating similar concentration effects. This amplification destroys any hope of stealth recovery after a single mistake. Drop one item, make one sound, and you're not just dealing with zombies who heard it directly. You're dealing with every zombie in a radius that heard the alert screech. And because they're fast, that entire radius converges in seconds. You can't fight your way through because fighting makes more noise, which brings more zombies. An infinite loop until you're surrounded. The only counter is complete silence before the first zombie detects you. Once the alert goes out, your only option is to run and hope you can reach safety before the swarm catches you. One zombie hears you, screeches, and suddenly 500 more are sprinting toward you. But here's what's even worse. When they're not hunting, they do something that makes them almost invisible: dormancy activation. When not actively hunting, infected enter a dormant state where they stand motionless or walk aimlessly, but snap to full aggression the instant they detect prey. The film shows this in South Korea when Jerry arrives at Camp Humphreys during rain. Zombies are standing in the rain doing nothing, just twitching. Survivors move through them quietly and carefully, and as long as they make no noise, zombies don't react. But the second someone makes a sound or one catches sight of movement, it's instant activation. 0 to sprint in less than a second. This dormancy makes infected far more dangerous than constantly active zombies. A zombie that's always hunting is predictable. You can track it, avoid it, plan around it. A dormant zombie can be standing 3 feet from you and you won't know until you make a mistake. The game uses this for ambush scenarios. What looks like a clear room suddenly fills with zombies when a player accidentally triggers activation. This is exhausting psychologically. Humans can't maintain constant vigilance indefinitely. You get tired, relax your guard, make a noise, and the dormant zombie you didn't see wakes up and screams to alert others. The few survivors who make it stay in completely isolated locations where zombies physically can't reach. They stand dormant in the dark until you make a sound, which means every shadow could be hiding one. Your best bet is a vehicle. Just drive away. Except vehicles have one fatal flaw: vehicle limits. Cars and aircraft provide temporary escape but require fuel, maintenance, and roads that don't exist anymore after society collapses. And one breakdown in zombie territory means certain death. The film shows multiple vehicle sequences. Jerry's family escapes Philadelphia in an RV. Later, they use helicopters. Aircraft carrier ships serve as mobile safe zones. These vehicles work as long as they're moving or in areas zombies can't reach. But the RV needs fuel. The helicopters need fuel and maintenance. The ships need supplies. All these dependencies require infrastructure that's collapsing. The novel describes clogged highways, abandoned vehicles, and fuel shortages that strand survivors. Once you're in a vehicle and moving, you're relatively safe because zombies can't catch a car at speed. But you can't drive forever. You have to stop eventually. And stopping in an area with active infected is suicide. Aircraft have an even worse problem. The plane sequence shows what happens when infected get aboard. One passenger was bitten before boarding, turns mid-flight, and within minutes, the entire cabin is overrun. The zombie swarm damages the aircraft, causing depressurization. Jerry triggers it with a grenade to blow infected out, but this crashes the plane. You can't fight zombies on an aircraft without destroying it. Cars need fuel, fuel needs stations, stations need electricity, and none of that exists anymore. So you're back on foot eventually, trying to outsmart things that shouldn't be able to learn. But they do. Pattern recognition. The infected learn through repetition and observation, adapting to defensive tactics like stacking higher to reach safe floors, or concentrating attacks on weakest entry points. This is subtle in the film, but visible if you watch closely. The Jerusalem wall breach happens because zombies pile specifically at points where the wall is shortest or most accessible. They're not spreading evenly. They're concentrating force where it's most effective. On the airplane, zombies swarm toward the cockpit and main cabin where survivors are concentrated. The game's AI demonstrates this through zombies prioritizing damaged barricades and flanking player positions. Whether this represents individual learning or virus-level optimization is unclear. The film never shows a single zombie displaying intelligence, but collective behavior suggests problem-solving. The novel's zombies don't show this at all. They're completely mindless except for basic stimulus response. If infected can recognize patterns, then any defensive strategy you use successfully once becomes less effective the second time. Set up a kill zone that works, and the next swarm concentrates somewhere else. The learning doesn't have to be fast to be lethal. It just has to exist. This destroys long-term survival planning. You can't establish a safe zone using consistent defenses because infected will eventually figure out how to breach it. The only reason some locations stay safe is because they're physically inaccessible, like ships offshore, or they maintain perfect noise discipline so zombies never discover them. The infected adapt to your tactics, which means your safe zone gets less safe every day. And even if you somehow establish a temporary shelter, time is working against you. Resource depletion. Even if you survive the initial outbreak, total collapse of supply chains means you're eventually running out of food, water, medicine, ammunition, and fuel with no way to resupply. The film touches on this lightly. The Navy ship has limited supplies. Fuel for helicopters is presumably limited. The WHO facility is isolated and must have limited stockpiles. None of these locations are self-sufficient long-term. The novel deals with this through survivor communities struggling to feed themselves, manufacturing ammunition, and rebuilding agriculture under constant zombie threat. But that's with slow zombies that can be managed. Fast zombies make agriculture impossible. You can't tend crops when any noise brings a swarm. You can't fish when docks are overrun. You can't hunt when forests are filled with infected. The game shows players constantly searching for ammo and supplies between combat. There's never enough. You're always rationing, always one firefight from running dry. Real World doesn't spawn ammunition crates in convenient locations. Once you've scavenged what exists in your area, there is no more. Medical supplies pose an even bigger problem. The camouflage vaccine requires functional research facilities with specific pathogens. Those facilities are rare, and most are in overrun cities. Antibiotics expire. Insulin requires refrigeration. Chronic conditions manageable with modern medicine become fatal when supply chains collapse. Food runs out, medicine expires, ammunition gets used, and there's no resupply coming, ever. So you ration, you conserve, you survive on less until you're waiting to starve. But starvation isn't even the biggest psychological threat. Isolation psychology, maintaining perfect noise discipline and total isolation for months or years without human contact breaks most people psychologically long before zombies get them physically. The film shows survivors on the Navy ship dealing with close quarters and stress, but doesn't explore long-term isolation. The novel has multiple accounts of survivors cracking under pressure, making fatal mistakes, because loneliness drove them to seek contact, even knowing the risks. Living in complete silence for fear of attracting zombies means no music, no conversations above a whisper, no shouting when frustrated, no normal human expression. That's manageable for days maybe, but months or years? People start taking stupid risks to break the monotony. They convince themselves one little noise won't matter. They get sloppy because constant stress exhausts their self-control. The few successful survivors would be people who already live in extreme isolation. Remote homesteaders in Alaska, lighthouse keepers, Firewatch personnel. Everyone else lacks the psychological conditioning. You're not just fighting zombies, you're fighting your own mind's need for stimulation and connection. And your mind wins that fight eventually. Complete silence, total isolation, no human contact for months or years. Most people break mentally before zombies ever reach them. And all of this, every impossible challenge, stems from one mathematical reality that dooms humanity from minute one: exponential math. One infected turning victims every 12 seconds creates mathematical growth that surpasses any response capability within hours, making containment impossible from the moment outbreak begins. Let's run the numbers. One zombie bites one person. 12 seconds later, there are 2 zombies. Each bites another person. 12 seconds after that, there are 4. After 1 minute, you have 32. After 2 minutes, you have over 1,000. After 5 minutes, the numbers become effectively infinite in any populated area. The film shows this with the Philadelphia outbreak. It starts with one person attacking on a street. Within minutes, the entire neighborhood is overrun. Within hours, the entire city is lost. No quarantine response can scale that fast. By the time you've identified the threat, called for backup, and mobilized containment teams, the infection has already grown beyond containment. The 12-second incubation removes the latency period that allows disease control to work. With most outbreaks, you have days or weeks between infection and symptoms where you can trace contacts and quarantine. With World War Z zombies, Patient Zero creates new infections faster than you can count them. This is why global collapse happens in days. Every major city has millions of people in close proximity. One infected person in a subway car during rush hour creates a cascade that spreads through the entire transit system before the train reaches the next station. Multiply that by every subway system, every airport, every shopping center, and you have simultaneous outbreaks in every population center on Earth. The novel's slower zombies allow for containment efforts that fail for other reasons, like political denial and inadequate military tactics. The film's fast zombies remove even the possibility of containment. The math simply doesn't work. You cannot respond faster than exponential growth with a 12-second doubling time. The outbreak is global and terminal from the moment it starts. Everyone has it in their heads that surviving a zombie apocalypse would be easy. Well, not everyone. Some people come to terms with the fact they would become a zombie on the first day of the apocalypse. Others would say that they are too out of shape to keep running, and others would probably have a complete change of personality when anarchy takes over. But for those that don't fall in those groups, they tend to think they could survive an actual zombie apocalypse. But what if the world isn't ravaged by slow-moving, stupid, corroding, alive-again dead boys and girls like what we normally see? If you think you could take the same skill sets into a universe where a single drop of infected blood turns you into a rage-fueled maniac in under 30 seconds, well, you've got another thing coming. Today, I'm not asking a question. I'm telling you why you wouldn't survive 28 Days Later's Rage virus, the Cambridge outbreak. The virus first appeared in 28 Days Later back in 2002, released from a Cambridge laboratory by well-meaning but really dumb animal rights activists who thought they were saving test chimps from cruelty. One attack from an infected primate and the activists started convulsing within 20 seconds. Blood poured from her eyes and mouth. Her body twisted into something that looked human but operated on pure, unfiltered rage. She attacked the other activists immediately, biting and clawing, spreading infected blood and saliva faster than anyone could react. Cambridge fell that night. London collapsed within days. Britain was a graveyard of screaming infected within 28 days. The military couldn't contain it because containment requires time, and this virus doesn't give you any. But here's the question nobody asked during those first 28 days. If this virus kills its host through starvation within weeks, why did scientists create something that spreads this fast? Hold on to that question, because the answer reveals why every survival strategy you know is already obsolete. The speed factor. Traditional zombie outbreaks give you breathing room to plan. Slow shufflers take hours to break down a door, days to form a meaningful horde. You can fortify, scavenge supplies, organize a defense. The rage virus rips that luxury away because infected hosts sprint at full speed the moment transformation completes. They don't lumber toward you moaning for brains. They charge like Olympic athletes high on bath salts and pure hatred, covering ground faster than most people can process danger. A single infected can run down a city block in seconds, vault over obstacles, smash through windows. Hordes move like flash floods, overwhelming entire neighborhoods before anyone realizes what's happening. You're not outrunning this. You're not outsmarting it either, because by the time you see an infected, you're already in striking range. But speed is just the symptom. What's actually happening inside the infected brain is where the real nightmare begins. And understanding this is the only way to see why 20 seconds is all it takes to end you. But speed is just the opening move. What makes the rage virus truly unbeatable is how it spreads. Traditional zombie bites take time to turn you. Hours, sometimes days of fever and decay before you reanimate. The rage virus infects in 10 to 20 seconds flat. One drop of infected blood in your eye, one scratch that breaks skin, one accidental splash of vomit across your face. That's all it takes. Your nervous system lights up like someone dumped gasoline on your brain and struck a match. The pain hits first, described by victims as burning from the inside out. Then come the convulsions, your body seizing as the virus rewrites your neurochemistry. your prefrontal cortex shuts down completely. But it doesn't just shut down random parts of your brain. The virus targets something specific, and when you realize what it's erasing, you'll understand why infected attack with such precision. All higher reasoning, all emotional control. Everything that makes you human gets stripped away in the time it takes to tie your shoes. What's left is pure aggression with zero off switch. The symptoms are horror movie material brought to biological reality. Your eyes turn blood red from burst vessels. Your mouth froths with infected saliva. You vomit blood constantly, projectile style, which doubles as both a symptom and a transmission vector. The virus amps up your muscle tension and pain threshold, letting you push your body past normal human limits without feeling the damage. Infected have been documented running until their feet shred, climbing until their hands break, fighting until they literally collapse from organ failure. They don't stop because pain tells them to. They don't rest because their body needs it. They attack until their target is torn apart or they physically can't continue. Then they move to the next target. So if infected collapse from organ failure, that means they die eventually, right? Wrong. Because what happened in 28 weeks later proved that even death doesn't stop this virus, and the mechanism is something you'd never see coming. 28 weeks later showed what happens when you think you've won. The US military helped Britain establish a safe zone in London's District 1, complete with biometric scanning, quarantine protocols, and armed checkpoints. Thousands of refugees returned to rebuild civilization under NATO protection. It should have worked. The infected had starved after 9 weeks without food, their bodies littering the streets like failed bioweapons. But the virus had one trick nobody anticipated. And this trick answers that question from earlier about why scientists made it spread so fast. Because they weren't trying to create a weapon that kills. They were trying to create something else entirely. But the virus had one trick nobody anticipated: carriers. People who contracted the virus but never showed symptoms. Their immune systems fought it to a genetic stalemate, keeping them normal while making them walking contagion bombs. The movie follows a carrier whose kiss reinfects her husband. He turns in seconds, and the whole safe zone collapses within hours. Military protocols meant nothing. Containment zones became slaughter pens. The second outbreak spread faster than the first because people had gotten complacent. But carriers raise an even bigger question. If some people can survive the virus, why can't scientists use their blood to make a cure? Keep that in mind, because the answer is buried in how this virus was actually created. The carrier mechanic is pure nightmare fuel for survival planning. You can't identify carriers by looking at them. They seem perfectly healthy, pass every medical check, show zero aggression, but their saliva and blood are loaded with active virus. One carrier in 28 weeks later infected dozens through indirect contact before anyone realized the danger. It means every survivor you meet is a potential vector. Every alliance is a gamble. Every kiss, every shared meal, every moment of human connection could be the exposure that ends you. Trust becomes suicide. Isolation becomes mandatory. And humans are social animals who go insane without connection. The virus doesn't just attack your body. It weaponizes your need for companionship against you. So isolation is the answer, right? Wrong. Because remember that question about what forced infected to evolve intelligence? The answer is isolation. Survivors isolating forced infected to adapt smarter hunting strategies, which means your best defense is what's making them stronger. Engineered nightmare. Here's where it gets worse. The RAGE virus was engineered, not natural. Scientists at Cambridge Primate Research Center were developing a cure for human aggression by combining an anger inhibitor with modified Ebola genes. The goal was noble: reduce societal violence through viral vector gene therapy. But the virus mutated during testing. Instead of suppressing RAGE, it amplified it to murderous levels, while keeping the Ebola-style hemorrhaging and rapid transmission. The researchers knew they'd created something catastrophic. One of them, Dr. Clive, quit and tipped off animal rights activists to shut down the project. But the activists didn't understand what they were releasing. They thought they were saving tortured animals. Before we go any further, I have just released my merch store with a very exclusive limited edition early supporter bundle. Only the first 50 people will have access to this bundle, so get it quickly while you still can at hownottotodie.store. Okay, back to the video. They actually opened Pandora's box with a biohazard inside, so they tried to stop it before release, which means someone else wanted it released. But who benefits from unleashing a RAGE virus? That question drives everything that happens next, because the virus didn't just escape, it evolved. The engineered origin matters because it explains why the virus is so efficient. Natural pathogens evolved to keep hosts alive long enough to spread. Killing your host too quickly limits transmission opportunities. The RAGE virus was designed in a lab where efficiency was the goal, and it shows. The 10 to 20 second infection time is faster than any natural virus on record. The behavioral override is total. ensuring maximum aggression for maximum spread. The hemorrhaging creates endless transmission opportunities through blood and fluids. It's a worst-case scenario virus that couldn't exist in nature because evolution would never favor something this deadly. But human engineering doesn't care about evolutionary balance. But efficiency in spreading isn't the same as efficiency in killing. And that's the final piece that explains why you wouldn't survive. Because the virus isn't trying to kill you, it's trying to replace you. We built a virus that treats people like gasoline and aggression like fire, and then we accidentally lit the match. The 28 days later, comics expanded the outbreak beyond Britain, showing how infected spread to mainland Europe through carriers on boats. One storyline follows a military group trying to weaponize the virus, modify it for controlled deployment against enemy populations. They fail spectacularly because you can't control rage once it starts spreading. Another arc shows infected adapting to their environment, learning to hunt in coordinated packs, showing rudimentary problem-solving when attacking fortified positions. The comics confirmed what the films hinted at. The virus doesn't stay static. It evolves, and each evolution makes survival harder. But adaptation is just evolution responding to pressure. The real question is, what was pressuring the virus to evolve? And the answer appears 28 years later in a form nobody expected: evolution of the infected. But nothing prepared fans for what 28 years later revealed. The newest film jumps decades forward to show Britain still infected, still quarantined, still a death zone despite international containment efforts. And the virus has evolved into multiple distinct variants. The baseline infected are still there, fast and vicious as ever. But now there are slow lows, infected who move at reduced speed and show self-preservation instincts, eating corpses and avoiding obvious danger while still attacking when opportunity strikes. Then there are alphas, infected with partial cognitive function who lead hordes, coordinate ambushes, and show genuine strategic thinking. One scene has an alpha directing other infected to flank survivors, pointing and grunting orders like a rabid general commanding a flesh army. The variant evolution changes everything because it means the infected aren't just mindless monsters anymore. Slow lows survive longer by conserving energy and avoiding suicidal charges, making them persistent threats in areas you thought were clear. But slow lows are just the warm-up. What comes next is where the virus stops being a plague and starts becoming an invasive species with its own ecosystem. And at the top of that ecosystem is something that should be impossible. Alphas turn hordes from scattered mobs into organized hunting parties with rudimentary tactics. You can't just outsmart base infected by hiding in a second-story building. Alphas will send scouts to flush you out while positioning the horde to cut off escape routes. They learn, they adapt, they remember patterns. And that means every survival trick you know from zombie media stops working because these things are evolving faster than you can adjust. So, infected went from mindless rage monsters to tactical predators with command structure in 28 years. But viruses don't evolve intelligence without evolutionary pressure, which raises the terrifying question: what was hunting the infected that forced them to get smarter? Why every survival strategy fails? The biological reality makes it impossible to wait out. Traditional zombies decay over time, rotting until they can't function. Rage-infected are alive. Their bodies follow normal human biology, minus the psychological breaks. They need food and water to survive, but they'll cannibalize corpses and drink from puddles. They starve eventually, but slowly, over weeks or months depending on available resources. And the evolved variants like slow lows have extended survival times because they eat strategically instead of burning all their energy on non-stop sprinting. You can't bunker down and wait for them to rot away. They'll still be hunting when your supplies run out, which brings us back to the carrier problem. If carriers can spread the virus without symptoms, and alphas can coordinate attacks, what happens when an alpha becomes a carrier? Hold that thought, because the answer is already happening in the newest film. Combat is suicide. Combat is a losing game from every angle. Infected feel no fear, no pain, no hesitation. They don't stop when shot unless you hit the brain or spine. Body shots just make them angrier. They don't retreat when wounded. A legless infected will drag itself toward you with its arms, still trying to bite, still trying to spread the virus. And they're fast enough to close distance before most people can line up a clean headshot. You might take down one or two, but hordes travel in dozens or hundreds. You'll run out of ammunition before they run out of bodies, and every second you spend fighting is another chance for infected blood to splash into your mouth or eyes. One drop ends you. One mistake turns you into another screaming sprinter tearing through survivor camps. But fighting isn't the worst option. What I'm about to tell you is why running and hiding are even deadlier. And it all comes down to what the virus does to your social instincts. The psychological warfare. The psychological warfare is just as brutal. These aren't rotting corpses. They're your neighbors, your family, your friends, wearing familiar faces twisted into masks of rage. 28 days later forces the main character Jim to watch an infected child attack him. 28 weeks later shows a father becoming infected and immediately hunting his own children with the same viciousness he'd show a stranger. The virus doesn't discriminate. It doesn't spare loved ones or recognize family bonds. Your infected spouse will tear your throat out without hesitation. Your infected child will attack you with the same rage as any other infected, and you'll have to kill them to survive. That mental toll breaks people faster than physical danger. How many survivors can shoot their own family members before they'd rather join the infected? But emotional attachment isn't just a weakness during infection. It's a weakness before infection, too. And the virus exploits that weakness in ways that make survival alone the only option while simultaneously making survival alone psychologically impossible. Fire works, but it's a strategic nightmare. Infected burn like everything else, but they don't stop attacking while they're on fire. They become running torches that spread flames to everything they touch, including you, setting a building on fire to clear infected risks, trapping yourself in the blaze. Molotov cocktails work in movies because directors need cool action shots. In reality, you're creating mobile fire hazards that might run into your only escape route while screaming, and fire draws attention. Every infected within earshot will charge toward the light and noise, turning your tactical advantage into a beacon that summons reinforcements. You might kill 20 infected with fire and attract 200 more in the process. Stealth is your only real option, and it's barely viable. Infected hunt by sight and sound primarily, though some evidence suggests they can smell blood. Moving silently in complete darkness gives you the best odds, but darkness also means you can't see threats until they're on top of you. Cities are death traps, because there's nowhere to move without making noise. Broken glass, fallen debris, abandoned cars with active alarms. One wrong step, and every infected in 3 blocks knows your location. Rural areas are better, but not safe. Fields offer no cover. Forests limit visibility. And you still need supplies, which means entering buildings where infected might be sleeping off their last meal. The environmental decay works against you constantly. 28 days later showed a Britain falling apart after 1 month. Traffic jams become permanent obstacles. Power grids fail within weeks. Running water stops when no one maintains treatment plants. Hospitals are infection zones packed with initial victims. Grocery stores get stripped bare by panicking survivors or become feeding grounds for infected hordes. Every resource you need for long-term survival is in a location where infected gather. You can't grow crops safely because fields are exposed. You can't hunt game because gunshots attract infected from miles away. You can't fish coastal waters because ports are urban zones, aka infected central. Starvation becomes as dangerous as the virus itself. The false hope of safe zones. Safe zones are temporary at best, death traps at worst. The District 1 collapse in 28 weeks later proved that no amount of military hardware stops the virus once it gets inside your perimeter. One carrier infects one person who infects a dozen more before lockdown protocols activate. By then, it's too late. The infected are inside the walls, turning safe zones into massacre sites. Soldiers can't shoot fast enough when infected move at sprint speed and attack from every direction simultaneously. But military failure raises another question. If trained soldiers with automatic weapons can't stop infected, what could? The answer exists, but using it means accepting something worse than the infected themselves. Gas attacks and firebombing become the only options, and those kill survivors just as dead as infected. The military response in 28 weeks later was Code Red extermination. Shoot everything that moves and burn the district to the ground. They still failed to contain it. Island survival seems logical until you remember Britain is an island, and it didn't help them one bit. The virus spread from Cambridge to London to the entire island in under a month despite being surrounded by ocean. Infected can't cross water easily, but carriers can. And carriers don't know they're carriers until they've already spread the virus to everyone on your boat or island community. One asymptomatic refugee joins your island paradise and you're back to square one, fighting a new outbreak with limited space to retreat. Islands also mean limited resources. No trade routes, no supply runs to the mainland, no escape if things go wrong. You're trapped with the infected in a confined space where eventually you run out of places to hide. The time pressure destroys long-term planning. Other zombie outbreaks let you establish routines. Clear a building, fortify it, set up rainwater collection, plant a garden, settle in for the long haul. The rage virus makes every location temporary because infected don't stop searching. They'll circle your building every day, testing for weaknesses. attacking anything that looks like entry. You can't make noise during the day or night. You can't light fires that produce visible smoke. You can't generate power that creates humming sounds. Any sign of life draws investigation, and infected have time to investigate because they're not decaying. You'll spend every hour in silent darkness, never fully sleeping, always listening for footsteps and screams. That's not survival. That's slow-motion psychological torture until you make a mistake. The infection time eliminates heroic rescue scenarios. Movies love the moment where someone gets bitten and spends their last hours saying goodbye, preparing their friends to kill them when they turn. The Rage virus gives you 20 seconds. No goodbyes. No meaningful last words. You get exposed, and you're gone before anyone processes what happened. Your friends watch you transform in real time from ally to enemy. There's no tragic buildup, just instant horror. And it means every close call is potentially fatal. Cutting it too close in a fight, taking one hit you couldn't avoid, tripping over rubble and landing in infected blood. Any of those scenarios ends your story immediately. You don't get dramatic death scenes. You get 20 seconds of agony followed by becoming the monster you were running from. Research for a cure is functionally impossible during an active outbreak. The comics showed military scientists trying to study the virus in contained environments. Every experiment either failed or made things worse. One story arc had them trying to engineer a vaccine using carrier blood. The test subjects either died from immune rejection or became infected themselves when the virus mutated around their genetic resistance. Creating a cure requires stable laboratory conditions. Uninfected test subjects. Years of trials and refinement. None of that exists. When infected are pounding on your doors and supply lines have collapsed. Any cure development would take decades in perfect conditions. You don't have decades. You have maybe weeks before your current hideout becomes compromised. The carrier mutation rate is unknown, which makes genetic resistance unreliable. Maybe 1 in 1,000 people become carriers instead of turning. Maybe 1 in 1,000,000. The films and comics don't give hard numbers because the virus is too new and research too incomplete. You can't bank on being the lucky one with natural immunity. And even if you are a carrier, you're now a plague rat everyone should avoid. Other survivors will kill you on sight if they figure out what you are because you're too dangerous to keep alive. You become a walking bioweapon with no faction to call home. Too dangerous for survivors and too human for infected to ignore. Being immune doesn't save you. It makes you a different kind of target. The infected life cycle creates a false hope trap. They starve after 9 weeks without food, so theoretically you could hide that long and emerge when they've all died off, but evolved variants like Slow Lows break that timeline by eating corpses and conserving energy. And 9 weeks is a long time to maintain perfect stealth in a world without infrastructure. No power means no refrigeration for food. No water treatment means dysentery from drinking contaminated sources. No medical supplies means any injury or illness could kill you. You're betting you can outlast the infected while also maintaining your health with zero support systems. Most people can't go 9 days without making a critical mistake, let alone 9 weeks. But starvation isn't what kills most survivors. What kills them is the answer to that earlier question about isolation. Because the longer you survive alone, the more the virus wins. Not by infecting you, but by making you into something that can't rebuild civilization, even if you survive. The global response. The global response would be containment through annihilation. Britain got quarantined immediately, enforced by international naval blockades shooting anything that tried to leave territorial waters. Other nations wouldn't risk infection spreading to their populations. They'd glass Britain from orbit if they had to. So, the rest of the world gave up on Britain, which means if you're inside the quarantine zone, you're not waiting for rescue. You're waiting for something else entirely. And what they're waiting for is revealed in the time pressure. Any outbreak in another country would trigger the same response. Infected zones would be isolated, firebombed, and written off as loss. Survivors inside quarantine zones wouldn't be rescued. They'd be acceptable casualties in protecting the rest of humanity. You're not getting saved. You're getting buried with everyone else to make sure the virus stays contained. The societal collapse is instant and total. Britain had 28 days before functional government ceased to exist. Most estimates suggest modern society runs out of food in 3 days if supply chains break. Power plants shut down in days without operators. Hospitals become infection vectors in hours. Military discipline breaks down when soldiers watch their families turn. Police abandon their posts to protect their own. What's left are scattered survivors with no coordination, no leadership, no shared plan. You're not rebuilding civilization. You're watching it burn in real time while trying not to burn with it. Every survival strategy relies on other people, and other people are the liability. You need groups to share watch duties, scavenge efficiently, maintain morale, but every person is a potential carrier. Every new face could be the infection vector that kills your entire group. You can't vet people medically without lab equipment that doesn't exist. You can't quarantine newcomers for weeks because you don't have the space or resources. And you can't turn away everyone because isolation drives people insane. You're forced to choose between the slow death of loneliness or the fast death of trusting the wrong person. Both options kill you eventually, which finally brings us back to that original question. Why did scientists create a virus that spreads in 20 seconds, evolves variants, creates carriers, and makes human connection fatal? The answer isn't that they wanted to create a weapon. They wanted to cure human rage. And what they actually created was proof that rage is the only thing keeping humanity alive. The infected adapt to countermeasures constantly. Early survivors learned to use noise as a distraction, throwing rocks to redirect hordes away from hideouts. Alphas learned to ignore obvious distractions and investigate the source instead. Survivors tried barricading with heavy furniture. Infected learned to work together, pushing obstacles aside through coordinated effort. Every tactic that works once gets adapted against, and infected don't need to sleep much. They can spend all night testing your defenses while you need to sleep eventually. They have the numbers, they have the time, they have the tireless aggression, you have fatigue, limited ammunition, and the creeping knowledge that you can't win this fight. And remember that question about why scientists made it spread so fast? Here's the answer they discovered too late. They weren't creating a weapon or a cure. They were creating evolution's next attempt at humanity, one that doesn't need civilization, doesn't need compassion, doesn't need anything except rage. And rage always wins, because rage never stops. So why wouldn't you survive the rage virus? Because it was engineered to be unsurvivable. It turns people into weapons in 20 seconds, spreads through any contact with infected fluids, creates carriers who can't be identified, evolves into smarter variants faster than you can adapt. The virus attacks every survival strategy simultaneously. Biological and psychological warfare wrapped in a package that looks like your neighbor's until it's tearing your throat out. You wouldn't survive because survival requires time, resources, and hope. The rage virus gives you none of those things. It gives you 20 seconds of pain, and then it gives you rage. And once you've got rage, you're not you anymore. You're just another reason someone else won't survive either. Dying Light looks like a game you can survive. That's the trap. Every zombie, every disease, every mutation exists to make survival not just hard, but impossible. Today I'm breaking down the 12 most dangerous threats in the Dying Light universe, starting with the disease that already killed 98% of the human race, the virus. The Heron virus doesn't announce itself. No fever warnings, no government alerts, no time to evacuate. You get scratched by a biter on a Tuesday morning, and by Wednesday, you're one of them. Here's what the game actually tells you. The Heron virus is canonically described as a hypermutagenic variant of rabies. Transmission happens through bites, scratches, and exchange of bodily fluids. The infection timeline isn't consistent, which makes it worse, not better. Patient 0 turned in roughly 30 minutes. A child in the official Dying Light novel lasted 5 days. The game's own GRE poster documents 4 progressive stages: flu-like symptoms, then seizures and hallucinations, then skin lesions and tumor growth, then full genetic mutation. Stage 4 is the point of no return. The official lore describes it as, you are a sick human trapped in a rotten body of a monster, and the only defense is Antizin, which isn't a cure. The GRE's own broadcast says it out loud. Remember, Antizin is a treatment, not a cure. You inject it every few days or the infection resumes immediately. Miss one dose and you're back on the clock. Dr. Zier, the scientist who was actually close to a real cure, was murdered by Race's men before he could finish it. Dr. Camden believed he could complete the work but needed Zier's full data, which was lost forever. There is no cure. There never was one. But here's where it gets worse. In Dying Light 2, the virus mutated into THV, the tachytransmissive Heron virus, which the GRE secretly engineered as a bioweapon. It escaped a level 4 lab in Geneva in October 2021. First cases appeared in Zurich and Paris. Within weeks, over half of humanity was estimated infected. By late 2023, THV had killed 98% of the global human population. Then came Black Monday, January 6, 2025. Chemical bombings using a GRE compound called THV GenMod killed hundreds of thousands more and made the virus airborne. In Dying Light 2's city of Villador, every single resident is already infected. Every single one. And what the virus builds from a freshly infected human still looks almost human. That's exactly the problem. Virals. A freshly infected person still looks human, still has hair, still wears their clothes, still has their face, and they sprint at you full speed. Virals are the recently turned, and the reason they're so dangerous is exactly that. Their bodies are still physically alive. The infection hasn't had time to break them down yet, so what you're dealing with isn't a shambling corpse. It's a human being running at athletic speed who wants you dead. They scream when they charge. They claw and punch. They don't bite, because at this stage the virus is focused on aggression, not feeding. When you hit them hard enough, some of them fall to the ground and plead for mercy, and then they get back up and attack again. That's confirmed in-game behavior. But here's the thing about virals that nobody talks about. They can parkour, fully. Whatever building you just climbed to escape, they're right behind you. Whatever gap you just jumped, they're clearing it. Whatever locked door you just sprinted through, they're coming through the window. There's literally no terrain advantage you have over a viral. The city was built for humans, and they're still human enough to navigate every inch of it. They're also attracted to sound. Every gunshot, every explosion, every metal impact when you're fighting one pulls more of them from surrounding buildings. So fighting a viral is a feedback loop. You make noise fighting one, which attracts 3 more, which forces you to make more noise, which attracts 6 more. Players have documented packs of 15 or 20 virals swarming a location because of a single gunfight that spiraled out of control. And here's where it gets dark. Virals aren't the end state. Virals that get enough UV exposure eventually degrade into biters, the slow shambling ones you stop being scared of. But virals that avoid sunlight long enough follow a different path entirely. They keep mutating, they get faster, they get stronger, and eventually they become something that makes a sprinting, parkour-capable, screaming human being look like the safe option. But if a pack of virals surrounding you sounds like a nightmare, wait until you meet the ones that stopped running altogether and learn to throw things instead. Goons. Most zombies you can outrun. Most zombies you can outsmart. Most zombies, if you get above them, are completely helpless. Goons are none of that. Goons are 8 feet tall, carrying a chunk of metal rebar the size of a small car, and they don't care that you have a plan. The horizontal swing sends a ground shockwave that hits you through a block. The vertical overhead slam sends a ground shockwave that hits you through a block. The 360-degree spin, which they use when you try to circle them, sends a ground shockwave that hits you through a block. Notice a pattern. There is 0 defensive option against a goon except movement, which means every player who learned to block and parry suddenly has to unlearn everything the game taught them the moment one of these things shows up, and the per-hit damage is brutal. A goon can one-shot players who aren't built specifically for survivability. Each hit you land on them makes them attack faster and more aggressively, so the longer the fight goes, the more dangerous they get. You are literally being punished for doing well. Dying Light 2 made them worse. The goon variants in DL2 come in elemental flavors: fire, toxic, and electric. A fire goon spreads burning damage across the ground on impact. A toxic goon creates poison clouds that drain your health and your immunity at the same time. An electric goon staggers you with every shockwave, leaving you helpless for follow-up attacks from every other infected in the area. And they don't come alone. Goons appear in environments full of biters and virals, meaning while you're trying to dodge an 8-foot rebar swing, you've got 6 other infected clawing at your back. The one actual weakness a goon has is that it cannot climb. Get above one and it can't reach you. Cool, but every building you'd want to climb is full of virals who absolutely can reach you. At least a goon is going to hit you and nothing else. Unlike the next one, which turns itself into a walking explosive and detonates the moment you touch it. Bombers, 20 hit points. That's all a bomber has. 20. By comparison, a standard biter has around 200. A bomber has less health than almost anything in the game, and it will absolutely kill you. Here's the problem. Bombers are infected whose bodies have bloated with pressurized toxic gas to the point where their chest cavity has literally torn open. You can see the organs, they're exposed, pulsating, and leaking. The in-game lore description tells you something genuinely disturbing about them. The bomber doesn't know it will explode. It runs toward people because it wants contact with another living thing. It hopes, on some instinctive level, that a human being will somehow end its suffering. And the moment anything touches it, it detonates. Any weapon, any hit, even shining a flashlight on one causes it to blow. The explosion radius is large enough to kill or critically injure anything nearby, and the noise it makes when it goes off immediately attracts every viral in the surrounding area, so a bomber doesn't just kill you directly, it kills you, fills the street with toxic gas, and then summons a pack of sprinting infected to finish whatever the explosion didn't. A single bomber functionally resets any situation you had under control. But wait, the Suicider variant in DL1 is worse. Where a standard bomber shambles slowly enough that you can identify and avoid it, a Suicider moves at viral sprint speed. It screams a specific warning when it spawns, but the reaction window between hearing that scream and it reaching you is minimal. A sprinting, instantly detonating biological landmine with a hair trigger and the same lethal blast radius. The game introduces Suiciders at night, when you're already dealing with volatiles, and combines them with enclosed urban environments where there's nowhere to create safe distance. The only reliable counter is a ranged headshot before it reaches you, which means you make noise, which brings back the virals, which means you make more noise. Everything in this game is a feedback loop that ends with you dead. dead, and nothing makes that clearer than what happens when you meet an infected that doesn't want to kill you. It just wants to tell everyone else where you are. Howlers. A howler cannot hurt you. 0 claws, 0 attacks, 0 direct threat in a straight fight. On paper, it is one of the least dangerous infected in the entire franchise. In practice, it is the most dangerous thing in the game. Howlers are virals whose mutation into full volatiles was derailed by exposure to the GRE's THV GenMod chemicals during Black Monday. The compounds attacked their larynx and lungs, creating a pulsating yellow growth on their torso filled with volatile toxic chemicals. Their bodies stopped becoming volatiles, but their purpose became something worse. When a howler spots you, that growth starts to boil, and then it screams. That scream doesn't just attract infected, it immediately initiates a chase sequence. Level 1. Just like that, before you've done anything wrong, before you made a sound, before you even had a chance to react. One howler making eye contact with you from across a street is all it takes to put volatiles on your trail, and as that chase level climbs, more infected spawn, faster and deadlier, until by level 4 you have volatiles actively hunting you from both the streets and the rooftops with 0 safe path out. Here's where it gets particularly brutal. After the 1.11 update to Dying Light 2, howlers were added to daytime spawns. They were always a nighttime threat before, which was already devastating. Now they patrol in sunlight. Now the one time a day you were supposed to be safe from volatile level escalation, a single howler spotting you from a rooftop can still trigger the exact same catastrophic chase sequence. The division between safe daytime and deadly nighttime, the core survival promise the game makes you from the beginning, is now functionally gone, and you can't fight your way out of. Killing the howler after it screams doesn't stop the chase. The signal is already sent. The only options are run or hide, and the infected that respond to the scream know the city better than you do. One zombie that can't touch you. An entire city's worth of infected that now know exactly where you are. If you think an alarm system that summons volatiles is bad, wait until you meet the infected that can literally bring them back from the dead. Revenants. Every other infected type on this list wants to kill you. Revenants want to build an army first. Revenants are boss-level infected found exclusively at GRE anomaly sites in Dying Light 2, and they are the only infected in the franchise with a confirmed supernatural power. They can resurrect the dead, not summon living infected from nearby. Resurrect? Corpse piles on the ground around a Revenant aren't scenery. They're reserves. Mid-fight, a Revenant raises its arms and pulls biters, virals, and occasionally volatiles directly out of the bodies stacked around the arena. You can kill every infected in the area, turn around, and the ones you just killed are getting back up behind you. That alone would be enough. But Revenants also generate a toxic mist that does 2 things simultaneously. It buffs the health of every infected inside it, and it damages you. So you're fighting a wave of resurrected enemies that are harder to kill inside a cloud that is actively draining your health. The longer the fight goes, the more the Revenant has summoned, the more of them are buffed, and the worse the situation becomes in every measurable direction. And here's the kicker. Despite their slow, lumbering appearance, Revenants have near teleportation mobility. One moment it's across the arena, the next it's in your face. Players documented this repeatedly before understanding it as an intentional design choice rather than a bug. It repositions faster than any infected its size should be capable of, cutting off retreats and eliminating the breathing room you need to deal with the horde it just spawned. They appear only at night, which means the clock is already against you before the fight even starts. Every second you spend in a GRE anomaly after dark is a second your immunity is draining, and Revenants are specifically designed to extend fights as long as possible by replacing everything you kill. The GRE built these sites. The GRE's experiments created these things, and the GRE made sure there would always be more of them. But a Revenant at least stays in one place. What comes next doesn't stay anywhere. It hunts, it tracks, and it remembers exactly where you are. Demolishers. Most threats in this game can be escaped by being faster, smarter, or more vertical than them. Demolishers eliminate all 3 options at the same time. A demolisher is what happens when the virus hits a police riot control officer and just keeps going. 8 to 10 feet tall, with the proportional strength to match. Their charge attack breaks through concrete walls, not wooden doors, not thin drywall. Concrete walls, the architecture you've been treating as shelter. The barriers between you and the street, the rooms you barricaded yourself into, all of it is load-bearing fiction against a demolisher. They can tear chunks of road surface out of the ground and throw them at you as projectiles. When you try to put distance between yourself and one, it throws the street at you, and every single one of their attacks is unblockable. Every one. There is zero defensive option in the game that applies to a demolisher. No block, no parry, no shield, no nothing. Dodging is the only answer, which means every second you spend fighting one is a second where mistiming a single dodge results in a hit that can kill you outright. One mistake. That's the entire margin. Here's where it gets worse. In Dying Light 2, THV Gen mod exposure during Black Monday replaced the riot armor with something the virus grew itself. Organic, rock-like blisters cover the body. Bone spikes protrude outward as natural weapons. The virus looked at a riot-armored human being and decided that wasn't armored enough, so it built its own version. A new shockwave stomp attack creates ranged knockdowns, meaning you can be floored by a demolisher from a distance you thought was safe. The named variant, Sergeant Deathrow, found in Old Town, has 13,708 hit points on Nightmare difficulty. That number is not a typo. They cannot climb. That's the weakness. Get above a demolisher and it can't follow you. But getting above one requires crossing the ground it controls, and the charge radius on a demolisher is wide enough to catch most players mid-jump. Players have documented getting hit by a demolisher charge while attempting a parkour escape, being launched across the street, and landing directly inside a viral pack. The city was built for humans. Demolishers were built to unmake that entirely. Every wall you trusted, every room you cleared, every choke point you controlled means nothing once one of these shows up. But at least a demolisher is something you can see coming. The next threat on this list looks completely human until the moment it doesn't. And by then, it's already too late. Screamers. Before you roll your eyes at this one, hear me out. Because screamers are not dangerous the way every other infected on this list is dangerous. They're dangerous in a way the game was specifically designed to make as psychologically brutal as possible. Screamers are infected children, found in Dying Light 1, stationary inside apartment buildings and houses they once lived in. You hear them before you see them, crying somewhere in a dark room. The kind of sound that makes every instinct you have tell you to help. When you get too close, when they register your presence, they scream. That scream does four things simultaneously. It disorients your vision completely. It renders you unable to attack or defend. It deals progressive damage for its full duration. And it infinitely spawns virals into the room until it stops. Every second the scream continues, more infected pour in. Every second you take more damage. And every second you can't fight back. There are exactly 4 ways to stop it. You can throw a Molotov. You can shoot from a distance, which makes noise and pulls more infected. You can charge in and hit first before it screams, which means getting close to an infected child in a dark room and attacking before confirming the threat. Or you can go silent, crouch, approach without making a sound, and kill it quietly. Here's what the quiet kill looks like. Kyle Crane reaches out and picks the child up. He holds them. The crying calms down, and then he breaks their neck. The game makes you hold the button. It doesn't cut away. That animation is one of the most deliberately disturbing moments in the entire franchise, and Techland put it there on purpose, because the game wants you to feel every option it gives you. A Molotov is clean and distant and lets you pretend it's just an obstacle. The quiet kill makes absolutely certain you understand what surviving in Harran actually costs. Screamers have approximately 20 hit points. They cannot move. They cannot attack directly. By every mechanical metric, they are one of the weakest infected in the game, and they are the only enemy type where every available method of dealing with them feels like losing. There is no good choice. There is only the choice that lets you keep moving. At least screamers stay where they are. What comes next covers an entire territory, hunts at night, packs in coordinated groups, and runs faster than you, and there are millions of them. Volatiles. Every infected type covered so far has a counter, a weakness, a terrain advantage you can exploit, a behavioral pattern you can read, a resource you can use to tip the odds. Volatiles have exactly one weakness, and the entire world is designed to take it away from you every single night. Volatiles are what virals become when they avoid sunlight long enough for the infection to fully optimize their bodies. What comes out the other side is the virus's perfected killing machine. Taller than a human, more muscular, completely stripped of any remaining clothing or personal effects, with exposed bone, torn muscle, and a split mandible jaw that opens wider than a human mouth should. Near volatile nests, players have documented hearing them speak fragments. It burns. Mercy. Let me die. Just let me die. The hosts are still in there. The virus doesn't care. Their speed matches a sprinting player. Their parkour capability is full and unrestricted. Every wall, every rooftop, every gap you can clear, they can clear. Their pounce attack pins you to the ground for a near guaranteed kill at low levels. When they can see you but can't reach you, they spit a corrosive projectile. In Dying Light 2, that spit is accurate enough to shoot paragliders out of the air mid-flight. Standard volatiles volatiles carry approximately 2,000 horsepower. They don't hunt alone. They coordinate, flank, surround, and cut off escape routes as a pack. Techland confirmed in their own developer blog that volatiles were specifically redesigned to hunt players more effectively across all areas of the map, both alone and in coordinated groups. The chase system makes it worse. A single volatile spotting you triggers level 1. Each level escalates the number and aggression of infected responding. By level 4, on Nightmare difficulty in Dying Light 2, the game's own design philosophy describes the situation as functionally unsurvivable. After the 1.11 patch, volatiles were added to rooftop patrols, permanently eliminating the high ground escape that made early DL 2 nights manageable. The one terrain advantage players had, gone, in a single update. Their only weakness is UV light. UV flashlights stun and repel them. UV flares create temporary breathing room. Caught in direct sunlight, they combust. That's it. That's the entire counter to the fastest, strongest, most coordinated predator in the franchise. And the virus is already working on that weakness too, because standard volatiles are not even close to the worst version of themselves. But before we get there, the real question is, what happens when a volatile keeps its human mind? When it can think, when it can plan, when it can talk, because that version exists. And it's been running entire factions from the shadows. Sentient volatiles. A volatile that can't think is a predator. A volatile that can think is something the franchise has no name for, because nothing in the survival playbook accounts for it. Sentient volatiles are infected who retain full human intelligence through the transformation. During the day, they look and behave completely human. They hold conversations. They make decisions. They blend into survivor communities without detection. At night, they fight the volatile instincts clawing at them from inside, sometimes winning, sometimes not. The virus gave them everything a standard volatile has. The speed, the strength, the spit, the pounce, the physical superiority over every living human, and left the person behind the wheel. And here's where it gets genuinely terrifying. Sentient volatiles possess telepathic communication across vast distances. Enhanced ones can command biters, goons, demolishers, and other volatiles directly. Not attract them, not provoke them, command them. Every infected type covered on this list, every screaming viral, every unblockable demolisher, every coordinated volatile pack, is a potential asset under the control of a single sentient who decides you need to die. The confirmed sentient volatiles in canon are not minor characters. The Mother, also known as Jasmine from the following DLC, led an entire cult in the countryside operating under her direction. Vincent Waltz maintained his human identity for decades through careful inhibitor abuse while running GRE operations from the inside. Aidan Caldwell from Dying Light 2 is sentient, the result of childhood GRE experiments that the organization ran specifically to engineer this outcome. And Kyle Crane, depending on the ending you choose in the following, becomes one, the protagonist of the first game, a sentient volatile. What makes this worse as a survival problem is the fertility detail. Sentient volatiles are confirmed capable of reproduction. They are not a mutation dead end. They are a new species, one that is stronger than you, smarter than you, can pass as you during daylight hours, and commands an army that none of your weapons, barricades, or safe zones were designed to stop. In Dying Light, the Beast, a community of sentient volatiles called the Exiles, survives through constant infusion of a mushroom-based compound that suppresses their instincts. Even they are on borrowed time. Even the most controlled, most organized, most self-aware version of this thing cannot permanently hold the virus back. It always wins, eventually. The virus engineered its perfect soldier and left enough humanity inside to make it strategic. That is not an accident. But a sentient volatile is still something you can theoretically reason with, run from, or negotiate around. What comes next has none of that complexity. It exists only to hunt you, and it is evolving past the one thing you had left to stop it. Alpha volatiles. Everything covered about standard volatiles, the speed, the parkour, the coordinated pack hunting, the corrosive spit, all of that still applies here. Alphas have all of it, but then the virus kept going. Alpha volatiles, officially designated blue volatiles by Techland in patch 1.12.2, first appear in the following DLC. The visual difference is immediate. Where a standard volatile is exposed muscle and bone, an alpha has grown a second skin. Dark blue chitinous armor plates cover the body, arachnoid in structure, hard enough that standard attacks that would stagger a normal volatile barely register. They carry approximately 4,000 horsepower, exactly double a standard volatile. Every stat across the board, aggression, speed, threat level, is maxed. They are not a stronger volatile. They are the volatile reclassified as something else entirely. But here's the thing that makes alphas categorically more dangerous than anything that came before them. Standard volatiles can be avoided avoided with the right consumables. Camouflage potions make you invisible to infected. Cloak potions suppress your scent. Players have documented surviving entire nights in volatile dense areas using these items as a last resort when every other option failed. Alpha volatiles are the only infected type in the entire franchise that can see through both. Camouflage doesn't work. Cloak doesn't work. Every tool the game gave you specifically for surviving volatile encounters stops functioning the moment an alpha is in the area. And in Dying Light, the Beast, the alpha volatile was pushed even further. Techland described the new alpha variant as the most dangerous and intelligent non-sentient infected ever introduced in the Dying Light universe. It is immune to the UV flashlight, the one universal counter that worked on every volatile in every game across the entire franchise. When it detects you, it hunts through scent, sound, and flashlight glow simultaneously. When a chase ends and you manage to hide, it doesn't despawn. It waits. It patrols. It retains every point of damage you dealt it across the entire night. It only disappears when killed, and if it isn't killed, it returns the next night knowing your patterns. The UV flashlight was the foundational survival tool of the entire series. The design philosophy of both games was built around it. The volatile hierarchy exists because UV light represents a hard ceiling on how far the infection can evolve. An alpha immune to UV light is the virus communicating very clearly that it found the ceiling and went through it. 0 of your standard tools work. 0 of your escape routes are guaranteed. 0 of the rules that kept you alive across every previous section of this list still apply, and that is still not the worst version. Volatile tyrants. There is one rule that is held across every infected type in this entire video. One constant that survived every mutation, every escalation, every evolution the virus threw at the franchise. Sunlight kills them. Not anymore. Volatile tyrants were introduced in Dying Light 2, patch 2.4.0, and they represent the single most significant lore development in the franchise's history. Not because of their size, which is larger than a standard volatile, not because of their attack patterns, which include chain combinations, triple spit sequences, and enhanced speed that makes standard volatiles look slow. Not because of their glowing red bodies and sores that make them look like something the virus built specifically to be seen and feared. All of that is true, and all of that matters. But none of it is why volatile tyrants are the final entry on this list. Volatile tyrants can survive in direct sunlight. Let that sit for a second. The entire architecture of survival across both games, the safe zone UV lighting, the dawn sprints to safety, the flashlight as a weapon, the rooftops as refuge, every single system was built on one foundational assumption: the sun wins. Players die at night and live during the day. That is the core contract of the Dying Light franchise. Volatile tyrants void that contract completely. On Nightmare difficulty, engaging one is described by the game itself as suicidal. They resist UV light in ways that send them into zones that would repel any other volatile. And when the sun rises, they don't combust. They don't retreat. They stay exactly where they are. Here's the full picture of what that means. In Dying Light 2's timeline, the THV pandemic killed 98% of the human population in 2023. By the time of the game's present day, the infected have been mutating continuously for over a decade. Standard volatiles evolved from virals. Alpha volatiles evolved past UV counters. Volatile tyrants evolved past sunlight itself. The progression is not random. The virus is not getting lucky. It is systematically identifying every tool humanity has and removing it from the equation, one generation at a time. Every survivor in Villador structures their entire existence around a single 9-hour window of daylight. Food runs, resource gathering, fortification, all of it happens between sunrise and sunset because everyone knows what comes after dark. Volatile tyrants make that window meaningless. There is no safe time anymore. There is no safe place. There is no counter that works across the board. The virus started as a rabies variant in a Turkish city in 2014. It killed 98% of humanity within a decade. It built volatiles that hunt in packs. It built alphas that see through invisibility and shrug off UV light. And it built tyrants that walk in the sun. You cannot survive Dying Light zombies because the virus was never trying to kill you. It was trying to replace you. And it's winning. Most survival games give you a fighting chance. Project Zomboid gives you a death sentence and lets you pick the font. Every single mechanic in this game is designed to kill you, and not in a flashy, dramatic way, but through a slow, inevitable chain of failures that starts the moment you step outside. Today I'm breaking down exactly why these zombies are basically impossible to survive, starting with the one rule that guarantees you'll be found: line of sight. Here's something most players don't figure out until it's too late. Windows don't hide you. That glass-walled office building you barricaded yourself into? Every zombie outside can see you like you're standing in an open field. Only fully opaque walls and solid doors actually break line of sight. Glass is functionally invisible to the detection system, which means half the buildings players assume are safe are basically fishbowls. But that's just the beginning of the problem. On a clear, unobstructed sightline, zombies detect you from 30 to 40 tiles away. Start moving or making any noise, and that range jumps to 50 tiles or more. That's half a city block. And once a single zombie spots you, its pathfinding updates every half second, locked onto your last known position. That alert state doesn't just fade either. It persists for 10 to 15 in-game minutes after the last sighting. One glance and you're marked. Stealth helps. Technically, walking while crouched cuts detection range by 40 to 50%, but the second you sprint, that advantage vanishes completely. And here's the structural trap nobody talks about. The map is enormous, resources are scattered, and long-term survival demands you cross open ground constantly. You physically cannot stay hidden and stay alive. The game forces you into the exact sight lines that get you killed. This is the quiet mechanic that starts every death in Project Zomboid. You don't die because a zombie caught you. You die because one saw you. But being spotted is only step one, because what happens next is where things get truly hopeless. Window lunging. Every survival game teaches you the same lesson. Get inside, close the windows, you're safe. Project Zomboid teaches you that lesson too. Then it kills you for believing it. Here's the thing about windows in this game. They look like barriers. They feel like barriers. Your brain registers glass and a frame and says, okay, that's a wall with a view. But mechanically, windows are entry points. Entry points that zombies will smash through without hesitation. Zombies can lunge through windows from a full tile away, and these attacks deal full bite and scratch damage. Not reduced damage, not through barrier damage, full, unfiltered, you're standing right next to them damage. And the speed of it is brutal. By the time you hear the glass shatter and register what's happening, the zombie is already on top of you. If the zombie has already spotted you through the glass, it's already locked on and heading straight for that window. So the moment you've been seen, your safe window position becomes a kill box. But surely barricading helps, right? It does. Technically, barricades add durability that zombies have to break through before they can get inside. Planks buy you time, metal bars buy you more, but they don't make the window invincible. A group of zombies will tear through barricades eventually, and then you're right back to square one. And if you think curtains fix this, they only block line of sight. If a zombie already knows you're in there from noise or from spotting you before you close them, curtains do absolutely nothing to stop the assault. This is why early game graveyards are full of players who did everything right. Found a house, closed the windows, set up a base. The most intuitive survival strategy in the genre is a reliable death sentence in Project Zomboid. Your instincts aren't just wrong, they're weaponized against you. And lunging through glass is honestly the least creative way these zombies will ruin your day. Wait until you see what happens when they catch you from behind. Fence tripping. Let's talk about the dumbest way to die in Project Zomboid. Not the most dramatic, not the most unfair, the dumbest. You're sprinting through a neighborhood. There's a horde behind you. You see a fence, and your brain says, jump it. Completely reasonable, totally logical. And it gets you killed. Here's the thing. Sprinting across any fence, gate, or even a hedge tile triggers a trip animation that locks your character in place for up to 2 full seconds while they stand back up. 2 seconds doesn't sound like much until you realize a zombie can close a massive gap in that window. You went from escaping to serving yourself on a plate, but wait, it gets better. The trip itself generates noise equivalent to running footsteps, audible to zombies within 8 to 12 tiles. So not only did you stop moving, you just rang the dinner bell. Every zombie in the area that wasn't already chasing you, now they are. And the injuries. Lacerations and sprains happen in 40 to 60% of fence trips, depending on what you're wearing. Heavier encumbrance increases fall damage by 15 to 30%, meaning the more supplies you're carrying, the harder you fall, and the louder you land. The game is literally punishing you for being prepared. The worst part? You can't skill your way out of this. Once the trip triggers, it triggers. The only prevention is movement discipline, specifically not sprinting through fences, which sounds obvious sitting here reading about it. It sounds painfully obvious. Every veteran will tell you, just don't panic run through fences like it's the easiest thing in the world. Then a horde appears behind them, and their survival instinct kicks in and they vault that fence at full speed like every single time before. Nobody is immune to this. The fence doesn't care how many hours you have. It just waits. But if tripping over a fence sounds embarrassing, wait until you see what happens when zombies actually get their hands on you. Exertion. Here's the most counterintuitive thing about Project Zomboid. Running away will kill you faster than standing your ground. Let me explain. Your stamina depletes at 100 points every 5 seconds of continuous sprinting. That sounds manageable until you realize your body only recovers to 50% of its maximum before forcing you into a walk state. You never get full stamina back during an active chase. ever. The tank starts half empty and only gets worse from there. But here's where it gets really ugly. Once your stamina drops below 30%, your attack damage and weapon accuracy both nosedive by 35 to 45%. So the moment you stop running and try to fight, you're swinging like a toddler with a pool noodle. Doesn't matter if you've got a baseball bat, a fire axe, or 200 hours of experience. The math doesn't care about your skill level, and it gets worse. Panic, which triggers automatically when zombies get close or you've recently been injured, accelerates your stamina drain by 30%. Read that again. The situations that demand running the most are the exact situations where running costs the most. You see a horde, your character panics, your stamina evaporates faster, you exhaust sooner, you can't fight back, you die. It's a compounding death spiral baked directly into the code. Let's say you do burn through everything and hit 0 stamina. Recovery requires 15 to 20 seconds of standing completely still. In a game where zombies are actively chasing you, standing still for 20 seconds. That's not a recovery mechanic, that's a death sentence with extra steps. This is why veterans don't run. They plan controlled retreats. They preposition fallback points. They jog instead of sprint. Because the game about escaping zombies is mechanically designed to punish you for escaping zombies. Your survival instinct says run. The game says running is how you lose. But at least exertion only punishes your legs. The next mechanic punishes your entire ability to function as a human being. Moodles. Here's where Project Zomboid stops being a zombie game and starts being a psychological horror simulator. Because Moodles aren't just status effects. They're a self-reinforcing collapse engine designed to make sure that once you start losing, you lose faster. The game tracks over 10 individual status conditions simultaneously: exhaustion, hunger, thirst, panic, illness, pain, depression. Each one chips away at your action efficiency by 5 to 10%. That sounds manageable until you realize these penalties stack multiplicatively, not additively. They don't just add up, they compound. Every new Moodle doesn't add a flat penalty on top of the last one. It multiplies against your already degraded performance, meaning the gap between I'm fine and I'm completely useless is way smaller than you think. Let me give you some numbers. The Panic Moodle, triggered just by being near zombies or taking a recent injury, slaps you with a 25 to 40% action speed penalty. Everything you do takes longer. Swinging a weapon, barricading a door, bandaging a wound. Now stack exhaustion on top of that. Your combat accuracy drops by 20% and your damage output falls by 15%. You're slower and weaker and less accurate, all at the same time. But here's the kicker. Once you hit 7 or more active Moodles, your base movement speed gets cut in half, 50%. In a game where mobility is literally the difference between life and death, that's not a penalty. That's a death sentence in slow motion. And then there's depression. This one is brutal because it doesn't go away when the danger does. Get isolated for too long, lose one too many safe houses, watch your supplies dwindle, and depression kicks in and stays for 3 to 7 in-game days. That's days of degraded performance from a single emotional break. The game is punishing you for having a bad week, and that bad week makes the next week worse. That's the death spiral. Each failure to manage your needs generates new Moodles. Those Moodles reduce your capacity to manage needs. The players who are already struggling are mechanically destined to struggle harder. The game doesn't just let you fail, it engineers your failure to accelerate itself. But if Moodles are the slow collapse, wait until you see what exertion does to your body in real time. Rear attacks. You spent hours finding that leather jacket. You reinforced it. You paired it with boots, gloves, maybe even a helmet. You feel protected. But the moment you turn your back, almost half of that survival strategy just disappears. Rear attacks in Project Zomboid are dangerous because the game doesn't give you eyes in the back of your head. There's no rear view indicator, no proximity warning, no audio cue that reliably tells you something is closing in from behind. Your character's field of vision is limited to roughly where you're facing, and zombies approaching from outside that cone get to close the distance without you ever knowing they're there. Every piece of gear you scavenged, repaired, and carefully equipped means nothing if a zombie you never saw latches onto your neck from behind, and they will latch on because the game is structurally designed to make that happen. Here's why. Zombies are silent. They don't growl from 30 meters away to announce their approach. In crowded urban areas, buildings block line of sight constantly. So you're not just vulnerable from behind, you're also far less likely to know something is behind you in the first place. The two worst possible conditions, zero awareness and full exposure, arrive at the exact same time. Now, layer in what we already covered about exertion. During sprinting, you're covering ground fast, but your camera and attention are locked forward. You're blowing past alleyways, corners, and open doors where zombies can stumble out directly into your blind spot. So, the faster you try to escape a threat, the more openings you create for zombies to reach you from directions you can't monitor. Fleeing doesn't save you. It multiplies the angles that can kill you. But the real thing that should terrify you is group encounters. When 5 or more zombies are closing from multiple directions, you physically cannot watch all of them. The ones behind you get free hits while you're focused on the ones in front. The majority of harm you receive in the most dangerous scenarios in the game comes from directions you simply cannot watch simultaneously. This isn't a mechanic you outplay. You can't spin fast enough. You can't position perfectly when 6 zombies are closing from 3 angles. The geometry guarantees that retreating from a group means exposing your back, losing visual tracking on half the threats, and giving zombies free opportunities to grab you from behind. The act of running away is mechanically identical to accelerating your own death, and if the geometry of fleeing wasn't punishing enough, wait until you hear what happens when a zombie reaches through a window you thought was keeping you safe. The helicopter event. You can do everything right in Project Zomboid and still get punished for it. That's the helicopter event in a nutshell. It's the single most dramatic mechanic in the game, and it exists for one reason: to remind you that safety is temporary. Here's how it works. Somewhere between day 6 and day 9 of your playthrough, the game decides you've been alive long enough. A helicopter appears overhead, hovering near your location for anywhere from 1 to several in-game hours. And during that window, it generates a massive noise event that pulls every nearby zombie straight toward your position. That's not a minor inconvenience. That's an extinction event. But the attraction effect isn't even the worst part. The helicopter essentially acts as a giant flashing sign that says, "Survivor here. Come eat." Zombies from a massive portion of the surrounding map begin migrating toward the noise. They don't spawn out of thin air. They walk from everywhere. Every zombie in the area now knows exactly where you are. Every single one. And here's the kicker. You cannot prevent it. You can try to minimize the damage by staying indoors and avoiding open ground, but the event will come. And in the default game, it only happens once per playthrough. That sounds merciful until you realize the game front-loads this nightmare into your first couple weeks, right when you're least prepared to handle it. That's it. That's your consolation prize. The real cruelty is what it does to your progress. Safe zones that took you hours to clear, barricade, and fortify can be completely overwhelmed as hordes converge on your location. You go from established survivor with a functioning base to early game scrambler running for your life. The game literally resets your situation because you were surviving. The community is genuinely split on this one. Some players argue it's essential pacing that prevents early runs from becoming boring loot and build simulators. Others call it rubber banding, plain and simple. You played well, you survived, you built something, and the game punishes you specifically because of that success. Your reward for thriving is a death sentence broadcast from the sky. Whether you think it's fair or not, the helicopter event proves something fundamental about Project Zomboid's design philosophy. The game isn't just trying to kill you with zombies. It's trying to kill you with hope. It lets you build, lets you feel secure, then tears it all away. And somehow, that's not even the worst thing these zombies can do to you. Drag down. The community calls it a death cutscene. And honestly, that's the most accurate description of any mechanic in this entire game. Drag down is the moment Project Zomboid looks you dead in the eyes and says your skill doesn't matter anymore. Here's how it works. When 4 or more zombies close within approximately 1.5 tiles of you at the same time, the game triggers a feeding animation. Your character gets pulled to the ground, and for the next 3 to 5 seconds, you can do absolutely nothing. No swinging your weapon, no using items, no movement, 0 input. You sit there and watch your character get torn apart like you're spectating your own death. Let me be clear about something. This is the only mechanic in Project Zomboid that removes all player agency simultaneously. Every other threat on this list you can respond to. You can fight back against rear attacks. You can manage moodles. You can slow down at fences. But drag down? You're a passenger. The game has decided what happens next, and your keyboard is decoration. And what happens next is brutal. Once that animation completes, every zombie involved delivers 8 to 15 points of laceration damage. 5 zombies pin you down? That's 40 to 75 points of damage in a single event. For context, That's enough to take a fully healthy character and leave them on the edge of death in seconds. Not minutes, seconds. But here's where it gets truly cruel. Surviving Dragdown is almost worse than dying to it. Think about what you wake up to. Your health is shredded. You've got active lacerations on multiple body parts, each one carrying infection risk. Your stamina's gone because you were already fighting when the group overwhelmed you, and you're still surrounded by the exact same zombies that just pinned you to the ground. You survived the cutscene, congratulations. Now survive the aftermath with half your resources and twice the danger. Heavy clothing and armor can reduce the chance of Dragdown triggering by 15 to 25%, but they cannot prevent it entirely. And considering that this mechanic accounts for roughly 35 to 45% of all deaths involving groups of 5 or more zombies, those odds aren't comforting. This is the mechanic that teaches every Project Zomboid player the same lesson. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how many hours you have. If enough zombies reach you at the same time, the game takes control, and it doesn't give it back until the damage is done. But Dragdown at least requires a crowd to trigger. The next mechanic, it only needs one zombie, and it's the reason nobody ever truly survives. Infection rate. Every mechanic we've talked about so far kills you in the moment. Infection doesn't. Infection kills you hours later while you're organizing your bookshelf thinking everything is fine. Here's how it works. A scratch from a zombie carries a 7% chance of Nox infection per wound. 7%. That sounds manageable. Most players don't even know scratches carry infection risk at all. They patch the wound, pop a bandage on, and move on with their lives. A laceration bumps the odds higher. But a bite? A bite is a guaranteed death sentence. 100% transmission rate. No exceptions. No luck involved. If a zombie's teeth break your skin, you are dead. Period. But it's that 7% scratch chance that catches people off guard because nobody respects it. And here's where the real horror begins. Nox infection doesn't announce itself with flashing lights. It starts creeping in almost immediately after the wound. Your temperature spikes. Within a few hours, anxiety kicks in. But here's the thing. Those early moodles are subtle. You survived the fight, you killed the zombie, you bandaged up, and your brain filed the entire encounter under handled. But the game didn't file it under anything. The game started a countdown, and the worst part, there is no cure. Zero. Not antibiotics, not rest, not any item in the entire game. Antibiotics treat regular wound infections, the mundane bacterial kind. Nox infection is something else entirely, and nothing in your medical supplies can touch it. Once you're infected, the progression is locked in. Anxiety becomes nausea. Nausea becomes fever. Fever becomes death. You're watching your character deteriorate in real time with absolutely zero tools to stop it. This is what makes infection fundamentally different from every other threat in the game. The zombie isn't the killer. The zombie is just the delivery mechanism. The encounter ends. You feel safe, and the actual lethal process is running silently in the background. Every single scratch becomes a question mark that won't resolve for hours. Did that one matter? Was that the 7% that hit? You don't know. You can't know. And there's nothing you can do about it if it did. It creates this invisible psychological pressure that never stops. Every combat encounter becomes a potential death sentence, and the only way to confirm it is to wait and watch your moodles. Every fight is a dice roll where losing means slow, guaranteed, untreatable death. New players fall for this every single time. The visible threat, the zombie lunging at you, gets resolved the second you swing your baseball bat. Threat over, danger gone. Except it's not. The real threat is invisible, delayed, and completely incurable. By the time you realize infection is the thing that kills you in this game, it's already too late. But infection, as terrifying as it is, still gives you a window. Still gives you a few hours to make peace, set your affairs in order, maybe go out swinging. The final mechanic on this list doesn't give you anything at all. Zombification. Everything on this list has been building to this. Every single mechanic, every system, every cruel little design choice funnels into one inevitable outcome. And here it is. Zombification doesn't start when you die. It starts the moment you get scratched. That 7% infection chance from a scratch, that guaranteed death sentence from a bite, those aren't just numbers. They're countdown timers. And once the Nox infection takes hold, the clock is ticking toward a transformation that nothing can reverse. A bite is 100% lethal, not 99%, not almost always. 100%. Your skin starts darkening, your veins turn black, and from that point, you're watching your character die in slow motion. Here's the thing that makes this mechanic so devastating. Once the infection sets in, nothing in the game can save you. No antibiotic, no surgery, no desperate last-second character action. The game doesn't even give you a Hail Mary. A scratch gives you a 7% chance of catching the Nox infection, and a laceration bumps that to 25%. But a bite? That's not a risk. That's a verdict. And roughly 72 hours after infection, your character is gone, dead, then reanimated. And the transformation itself is the cruelest part. When your character finally turns, they become an NPC zombie wandering the map. But they don't keep your skills. They don't carry your inventory in any meaningful way. Every hour you spent leveling carpentry, every base you fortified, every supply run you barely survived, gone. Zombification isn't just death. It's erasure. Total, complete erasure of everything your run built. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. The developers have explicitly said this is the point. The entire game is built around one philosophical statement. You will not survive. You will become what you fight. The only question is how long you can delay the inevitable. That's not a failure state. That's the thesis. And once you understand that, every other mechanic on this list clicks into place like a machine. Line of sight from the very beginning of this video forces encounters. Encounters cause wounds. Wounds start infection timers, and infection timers end here. In zombification, the whole game is a pipeline, a structured mechanical conveyor belt that starts the second a zombie spots you through a window 40 tiles away and ends with you shambling around as one of them. The densest urban zones, the places with the best loot, the places you need to go to survive, are crawling with so many zombies that scratches, lacerations, and bites become practically unavoidable. The game punishes you for playing it, not out of cruelty, but because that's the argument it's making. Survival isn't a win condition. It's a delay tactic. Every fence you tripped over, every window a zombie lunged through, every moodle that stacked until you couldn't swing a bat, every sprint that drained your stamina at the worst possible moment, every rear attack you never saw coming, every drag down that ripped away your agency, all of it was just the game walking you, step by step, toward this screen. The one where your character stands up with dead eyes and joins the horde. You don't lose in Project Zomboid, you just stop being the one holding the controller. Most people think surviving a zombie outbreak comes down to weapons, barricades, and willpower. But in Resident Evil, you're already infected before you even know there's a problem. The T-virus doesn't wait for a bite. It comes through your tap water, your air vents, your morning coffee. And by the time you realize something is wrong, it's been inside you for hours. Let's start with the reason you never had a chance. The T-virus air-water transmission. Here's something nobody wants to hear. You don't need to get bitten to die in Raccoon City. You don't need to touch a zombie, step in infected blood, or make a single mistake. You just need to breathe. The T-virus was in Raccoon City's water supply before most residents even knew an outbreak was happening. The virus survives in water systems for up to 72 hours without a host. That means every glass of tap water, every shower, every pot of pasta boiled on the stove was a direct infection vector. People were drinking the apocalypse for breakfast and had zero idea. But water was only half the problem. In enclosed spaces, the virus goes airborne through ventilation systems. The Hive facility, Umbrella's underground research complex, spread infection across multiple floors simultaneously through its own air filtration system. The building's life support became the delivery mechanism. The thing designed to keep people alive is exactly what killed them. And here's where it gets worse. Fighting back creates new infection vectors. Burning or damaging infected tissue aerosolizes viral particles. Shooting a zombie in a hallway, running past a corpse, even being near a body that's been crushed by debris, all of it throws the virus into the air. Action kills you. Inaction kills you. There is no correct response. The September 1998 Raccoon City outbreak hit over 100,000 residents through simultaneous multi-vector transmission. Water, air, food, surface contact, all active at the same time. Immunocompromised individuals showed 100% symptom manifestation within 24 to 48 hours. Healthy adults lasted a little longer, but a little longer isn't survival. It's just a slower death. And before you say, just stay inside and wear a gas mask, the virus adapts its transmission method based on environmental conditions. Standard protective equipment became obsolete within hours of new strain emergence. Every precaution you can think of, the virus already has an answer for. You were never fighting zombies. You were fighting your own city's infrastructure. And infrastructure always wins. But at least airborne infection kills you slowly. The next threat doesn't give you that luxury. The Crimson Head mutation. Great, so you managed to kill a zombie. Congratulations. You just made everything worse. Here's the thing about the T-virus that nobody warns you about. Killing a zombie doesn't end the threat. It starts a countdown. Residual viral activity in the neural tissue doesn't stop when the body drops. It accelerates. The virus essentially reboots the brainstem, rewiring whatever's left for localized motor control, and within minutes of death, that corpse gets back up. But it doesn't come back as the same slow, stumbling mess you just put down. It comes back as a Crimson Head. The name comes from the blood-red skin caused by the accelerated mutation, and these things are a completely different problem. They're noticeably faster than standard zombies, closing distance at a sprint instead of a shuffle. They're more aggressive, more relentless, and here's the part that should terrify you: they attack with razor-sharp claws instead of just biting. That slow, clumsy grab-and-chomp routine? Gone. A Crimson Head charges you down and slashes. The safe distance you relied on before is now meaningless. But wait, it gets worse when you do the math. Standard bullets don't actually kill zombies. They produce a few minutes of temporary incapacitation. That's it. Actual corpse destruction requires fire, complete dismemberment, or headshots precise enough to obliterate the brain. So every single encounter now costs you double the resources. Rounds to drop the zombie the first time. Rounds to deal with the Crimson Head version minutes later. And that second fight is harder, faster, and more dangerous than the first. In the Spencer Mansion, every zombie you dropped and didn't burn was a future Crimson Head waiting to happen. Every single one. The mansion became a ticking time bomb of reanimation, and most of the people inside had zero idea it was coming. Now picture this over a 6-day survival window. You fight through a hallway, spend precious ammunition dropping 3 zombies, and push forward. Minutes later, that hallway behind you has 3 Crimson Heads in it. You've essentially been filling every room you cleared with faster, deadlier versions of the things you just barely survived. Your escape route is now more dangerous than the path ahead. The cruelest part? This is a punishment for fighting back. The reward for winning a zombie encounter is a harder version of the exact same fight on a timer you can't see. And every bullet you spend digging yourself out of that hole is a bullet you won't have for what comes next. Speaking of things you won't have enough of, let's talk about the resource problem that makes all of this completely unsustainable. Limited resource. Scarcity. Let's do some math, and I promise the numbers are worse than you think. You've got a handgun, maybe a shotgun if you're lucky. Standard ammunition capacity across Raccoon City sits between 50 and 120 rounds per weapon type. Sounds decent, right? Now consider that an average zombie requires 3 to 8 rounds just to go down. Not die, go down, temporarily. We already covered what happens after that. So let's say you're plotting an escape route through the city. A moderate number of zombie encounters along that path demands 240 rounds minimum to stay ahead of the threat. Total scavenging yields across a realistic route through Raccoon City? 200 to 300 rounds combined. You're already in deficit before you even factor in liquors dropping from ceilings, before you account for missed shots under panic, before you consider that half the buildings you'd loot are already picked clean or too dangerous to enter. But ammunition is just the first item on the checklist. Let's keep going. Food. Sealed umbrella environments were rationed for 12 people maximum. The Raccoon City outbreak displaced over 100,000 residents simultaneously. There is no meaningful food supply for civilian survivors. That's not an exaggeration. That's arithmetic. Power and fuel systems across the city failed within 48 hours of the outbreak. Backup generators ran 6 to 18-hour cycles before total depletion. Once those died, so did the lighting, communications, electronic locks, security systems. Everything a survivor might use to create even a temporary safe zone. Gone. Water. Potable water became completely inaccessible after ground supply contamination on September 26, 1998. Emergency rations could sustain survivors for roughly 72 hours. The outbreak ran for 6 full days before military response. That's double the water supply window. You're dehydrated and weakening long before anyone shows up to help. And medical supplies? Herbs restore approximately 40% of physical health. That's useful for a cut or a bruise, but they cannot reverse viral damage. They cannot cure T-virus infection. The only thing that could do that was Umbrella's antiviral compounds, which were never distributed to civilian populations. Ever. So every injury you sustain is permanent progress toward death. And the one thing that could actually save you was locked in a corporate vault somewhere while the city burned. Every survival resource, ammunition, food, power, water, medicine, runs out before the crisis ends. You're not losing a war of attrition. You lost it before it started. But running out of supplies assumes you're navigating a normal city. Raccoon City isn't normal. The buildings themselves are trying to kill you. Environmental death traps. Let's say you've rationed perfectly. You've avoided every zombie, conserved every bullet, and somehow kept yourself alive through pure discipline. Congratulations. The building you're standing in is about to kill you anyway. Here's the thing. thing about Umbrella facilities. They weren't designed to keep people safe, they were designed to keep things contained. And there's a massive difference between those two goals. Every research lab, every underground complex, every hospital basement was built with one assumption baked into the architecture. Eventually, something will escape, and when it does, everything inside needs to die. The Hive facility didn't even bother with an evacuation plan. The Red Queen's containment protocol was simple: seal every exit and flood the entire complex with halon gas. No warning, no countdown, no escape window, just locked doors and poison air. That's not a safety system. That's an execution chamber with an AI pulling the lever. The police station laboratory triggered automatic firewall closures the moment a security breach was detected. The hospital basement flooded lower levels with active electrical hazards running through the water. You're not navigating a building. You're navigating a kill box that someone got paid very well to engineer. But here's where it gets genuinely absurd. Umbrella built cascading failure protocols into these places. A single security breach in one zone would trigger mass sterilization fires across multiple adjacent zones simultaneously. Think about what that means. The same breach that might create your only exit would seal and incinerate every room around it. You open one door to escape, and 3 hallways behind you become crematoriums. The building punishes you for trying to leave, and the variety of ways these places can kill you is almost impressive. Freezer units running at cryogenic temperatures sat in the same facility as incinerators hot enough to reduce a tyrant to ash in seconds. We're talking industrial cremation levels of heat, hundreds and hundreds of degrees, right next to rooms cold enough to kill you from hypothermia in minutes. Exposure to either extreme without protection is a death sentence. Treatment for those conditions requires medical resources that, as we already covered, don't exist anymore. Then there are the purpose-built containment zones, laser grids, spike traps, controlled explosive demolition systems embedded directly into the walls of tyrant experiment areas. These weren't industrial accidents waiting to happen. These were professionally designed killing floors meant to neutralize bioweapons that got loose. The fact that you're a human being and not a tyrant doesn't matter. The building can't tell the difference. It doesn't care. Water-based hazards alone, submerged passages, flooded reactors, chemical coolant systems are responsible for a staggering number of deaths across the franchise. Players drown in them. Characters die in cutscenes to them. Environmental kills from the building itself rival direct zombie encounters as a cause of death. Nearly as many people die from the architecture as from the monsters. That's the darkest joke in all of Resident Evil. Umbrella knew their experiments would fail. They knew containment would breach. So they built facilities that treat every living thing inside as a target. Zombies and survivors die with equal efficiency. The architecture doesn't discriminate, but at least a building stays in one place. It follows rules. It triggers on protocols. The next threat on this list doesn't follow rules, doesn't stop, and it's specifically hunting you. The Tyrant Stalker factor. Everything up to this point has been impersonal. Disease doesn't know your name. Resource scarcity doesn't care who you are. A building collapsing on you isn't personal. But a tyrant? A tyrant has your scent. It knows where you went, and it is coming specifically for you. Let me give you the numbers so you understand exactly how screwed you are. The T-103 Tyrant weighs 427 kilograms. That's nearly half a metric ton of engineered muscle and bone moving at 15 to 20 kilometers per hour. For context, that's faster than the average human jog. You're not outrunning this thing. You're just choosing which direction you'd like to die from, but speed isn't even the real problem. The real problem is that it heals. Damaged tissue regenerates within 30 to 60 seconds of injury. You shoot it, it stumbles, it gets back up. You shoot it again, same thing. Standard ammunition requires somewhere between 180 and 240 rounds to achieve sustained incapacitation. Not death, incapacitation. That's 10 times the realistic carrying capacity of most survivors. You would need to be hauling a small armory on your back just to slow it down temporarily, and you've already burned through most of your ammo on regular zombies 3 sections ago. Here's where it gets worse. A tyrant's hearing range extends beyond 200 meters. Its olfactory tracking maintains detection accuracy within 2 to 3 hours of your last known position, even across exterior environments. Running doesn't create distance. It buys minutes. You can sprint through 3 city blocks, barricade yourself inside a building, and it will still find you because it can literally smell where you've been. And before you think, well, trained soldiers could handle this, no, they couldn't. Umbrella's own closed environment testing showed tyrants achieved an 89% success rate against trained military commandos. Professional soldiers with full tactical gear, coordinated teams, and heavy weaponry still died 89% of the time. Civilian survival estimates sat at 2 to 5%. These are people who train for combat every single day, not exhausted civilians who haven't slept in 72 hours and are rationing their last 12 bullets. So, you can't outrun it, you can't outgun it. Fans love to bring up theoretical vulnerabilities like acid rounds, extreme cold, or crushing force. Cool. All of those require laboratory access, specialized equipment, or industrial machinery that no realistic civilian survivor has available to them during an active outbreak. The debate about whether tyrants are unbeatable versus unbeatable for civilians ends at the word civilians. That's you. But here's the detail that genuinely disturbed me researching this. The Nemesis variant from Resident Evil 3 demonstrated adaptive learning across encounters. Every single engagement it had with Jill Valentine produced improved tactical counters to her specific weapon choices. If you used a shotgun, it adjusted its approach distance. If you used explosives, it changed its movement patterns. Your strategy works exactly once. The second time you try it, the tyrant has already adapted. You're not fighting a brute. You're fighting a brute that gets smarter every time it fails to kill you. So let's reframe the math one final time. You can't outrun it. You can't carry enough ammunition to stop it. It regenerates faster than you can damage it. It tracks you by smell for hours after you've fled. It killed 89% of trained soldiers. And it learns from every single thing you do. You are not fighting a tyrant. You are delaying the inevitable. But at least a tyrant is one thing. One terrifying, unkillable thing, but still just one. What happens when the zombies themselves stop acting like individuals and start acting like something far more coordinated? The hive mind mentality. Up to this point, everything I've told you about zombies has assumed one thing: that they're stupid, slow, shambling, disoriented, exploitable. And individually, they are. You can outmaneuver a single zombie. You can bait it into a doorway, sidestep it, put a table between you and it. One zombie is a problem you can solve, but here's where the rules change, and nobody gives you the memo. When zombie concentrations hit critical mass, somewhere around 50 or more in a localized area, they stop behaving like individuals. The shambling idiots you've been outsmarting suddenly start demonstrating coordinated behavior, herding tactics, synchronized approach vectors, environmental manipulation. They start moving obstacles to cut off your exits. They funnel you into choke points. They flank. Let me say that again. Zombies, flanking. These are creatures that couldn't figure out a doorknob 48 hours ago, and now they're executing military-grade tactical maneuvers, and the reason is chemical. Queen and hive mind entities documented across the franchise coordinate zombie behavior through pheromone-based chemical signaling. The swarm isn't a group of zombies. It's a single distributed organism wearing 30 different bodies, and you cannot hide from it. Pheromone coordination allows infected to distinguish between other infected and uninfected humans at distances up to 150 meters. You can't disguise yourself. You can't smear zombie guts on your clothes and blend in. You can't approach a swarm without being immediately flagged as a target. The organism knows exactly what you are and exactly where you are before you even see it. Here's the thing that makes this genuinely terrifying. Swarm attack patterns show 3 times increased lethality compared to individual zombie encounters. That's not just because there are more of them. Multiple infected exchanging bodily fluids with a single target compounds infection vectors in ways a single bite simply cannot replicate. One zombie grabs you, you might fight it off. 30 zombies operating as a coordinated unit, you're getting hit from angles you didn't even know existed. Now, there is one partial counter. Removing the queen entity reduces swarm coordination by 60 to 70%, but that still leaves 30 to 40% of the coordination intact. That's still enough to kill you, and good luck identifying which zombie in a horde of 50 is the one broadcasting the chemical signals. The other option is isolation. Separating yourself from other survivors reduces swarm targeting by roughly 40%. Sounds great until you realize that being alone means 0 collaborative defense, 0 resource pooling, and 0 help when you inevitably get cornered. The only tactical option that helps you individually destroys every group survival strategy simultaneously. So let's reframe what you're actually dealing with. You're not fighting 30 zombies. You're fighting a single 30 zombie organism that thinks tactically, adapts to your movement, cuts escape routes before you reach them, and uses the environment against you. It flanks, it herds, it corners, and it does all of this with bodies that feel 0 pain and require 0 rest. The mental model you had of zombies being manageable, that was based on fighting individuals. The second you encounter a swarm, every assumption you made becomes a liability. And the worst part is, you won't know your assumptions were wrong until you're already surrounded around it. But even if you could somehow avoid every swarm, outrun every tyrant, and conserve every last bullet, there's one factor that determines your survival before any of that matters, and you have absolutely zero control over it. Genetic compatibility. Luck. Everything up to this point has been about what you do wrong, bad decisions, poor resource management, not running when you should have been running. But this one's different. This isn't about what you do. It's about what you are, and you don't get a say in it. The T-virus doesn't treat every human body the same way. Your body's reaction to infection is determined by your genetic makeup, your unique biological blueprint. Before you ever stepped foot in Raccoon City, before the outbreak even started, your fate was already written into your DNA. Here's what most people get wrong about zombie outbreaks. They assume infection equals zombification. It doesn't. Most exposed humans do develop full infection and eventually become zombies. But that's not the only outcome. Some people's bodies reject the virus so violently that every system shuts down at once, killing them through acute organ failure before transformation even begins. And the ones who do become zombies? They're not safe either. Prolonged exposure to certain T-virus strains can trigger secondary mutations, a process called VXT, that transforms an already zombified human into something far worse, faster, smarter, skinless. You know them as lickers. Becoming a standard zombie is actually the middle outcome, not the worst one. Let that sink in for a second. The best case scenario for most people isn't survival. It's becoming the least horrifying version of a monster. Natural immunity does exist. Roughly 10% of the human population carries specific genetic markers that make them functionally resistant to T-virus integration. 1 in 10. Sounds almost hopeful until you realize that means 9 out of 10 people are guaranteed to lose. And here's where it gets interesting, because this opens up one of the biggest quiet debates in the Resident Evil community. Chris Redfield, Claire Redfield, Jill Valentine, Leon Kennedy. We celebrate these characters for their skill, their training, their ability to fight through impossible odds. But what if the real reason they survived wasn't exceptional combat ability? What if it was exceptional genetics? Think about it. These protagonists walk through environments saturated with airborne viral particles, get grabbed by infected creatures, wade through contaminated water, and somehow never turn. We call it plot armor. But the lore actually provides a scientific explanation. They might simply be part of that 10%. Their DNA decided they would survive before they ever picked up a gun. And the cruelest part? Umbrella had the tools to shift those odds. Vaccination and pre-exposure treatment protocols existed in their research that could theoretically improve survival chances significantly. The cure, or at least a meaningful preventative measure, was real. It was sitting in locked drawers, in burning buildings, in facilities rigged to self-destruct. Umbrella never distributed it to civilian populations, not because it didn't work, because civilians weren't the point. So here's the existential gut punch this whole section has been building toward. You have no way to know your compatibility status before exposure. There's no test you can take, no symptom to watch for, no early warning system. Your DNA already decided whether infection means immediate death, zombie transformation, or eventual mutation into something the games don't even bother giving a proper name. And you'll find out the answer at the exact moment it's too late to matter. Every section before this gave you something to fight against, a strategy you could have used, a mistake you could have avoided. This one doesn't. This is the one variable you can't train for, can't plan around, and can't shoot your way through. Your survival was never fully in your hands. But even if you beat those odds, even if your genetics land you in that miraculous 10%, there's one final problem. And it has nothing to do with zombies at all. Global sterilization protocols. Let's say you did it. You survived the T-virus in the air and water. You burned every corpse before Crimson Heads could reanimate. You rationed your ammunition down to the last bullet, navigated buildings designed to kill you, outran a tyrant that should have ended you 3 times over, outsmarted a coordinated swarm, and your genetics didn't betray you. Congratulations. You're one of the most resilient human beings who ever lived. The government is going to kill you anyway. On the night of September 30th, 1998, the US government authorized the sterilization strategy for Raccoon City. At sunrise on October 1st, missiles hit. Not a targeted strike, not a surgical operation. Total erasure. The blast leveled the entire urban environment and every biological specimen inside it, human, zombie, and otherwise. There was no margin of survival built into the plan. There was no margin at all, and the reasoning was brutally simple. The outbreak had reached a point of no return, and the only acceptable response was to wipe Raccoon City off the map with a single, overwhelming missile strike. They weren't trying to contain the outbreak anymore. They were trying to make sure nobody could ever prove it happened. Here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. The estimated civilian casualties exceeded exceeded 100,000 people. That number wasn't accidental. The entire zone was classified as a total containment scenario with zero tolerance for survivors exiting the perimeter. Read that again. Zero tolerance. It didn't matter if you were immune. It didn't matter if you'd fought your way to the edge of the city. If you were inside the line when the missiles came down, your survival was considered a containment failure, not a success story. But wait, it gets worse. The strike wasn't designed to leave anything behind to monitor. The point was annihilation. One strike, total destruction. Nothing left to check. They weren't planning follow-up operations because the plan was to make sure follow-up operations were unnecessary. You don't sterilize the ashes when the goal is to leave no ashes at all. The timeline is the cruelest detail. Survivors had roughly a 6-day window between the outbreak reaching critical mass and the missiles falling. Not because the government was trying to give anyone time to escape, because operational logistics and political authorization took that long to finalize. There's credible speculation that the delay was intentional, used to document mutation progression before destroying the evidence along with the witnesses. And Raccoon City wasn't treated as a tragedy. It was treated as a proof of concept. Resident Evil canon establishes that the sterilization became official doctrine. Any facility, any city, any region showing irreversible outbreak conditions was authorized for immediate destruction. You see references to these protocols in Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village. The playbook didn't die with Raccoon City. It was refined, improved, made faster. That's the real horror of this entire video. Every section described a different reason you can't survive. The T-virus finds you before you know it's there. Crimson Heads punish you for fighting back. Resources bleed dry no matter how careful you are. The buildings themselves are designed to kill you. The tyrant hunts you with precision you can't outrun. The swarm coordinates against you like a single organism. Your own DNA might have already decided your fate before the first zombie ever appeared. And if somehow, against every odd, you made it through all of that, the solution deployed to save everyone else considers your death an acceptable rounding error? There was never a version of this where you win. The doctrine exists. The authorization protocols are already written. The next Raccoon City isn't a question of if, it's a question of when, and the people making those plans already know you won't make it out. Not every zombie apocalypse is created equal. Some are containable regional nightmares. Some are extinction events so total that zero survivors walk out the other side. Every outbreak, every infection mechanic, every rule on this list traces back to one man. Today I'm ranking the 10 deadliest fictional zombie apocalypses ever made, starting with the one that invented them all, Romero's Ghouls. Before we rank anything, we need to talk about the man who made this entire conversation possible, George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead came out in 1968 on a budget of $114,000. It grossed over $30 million. But more importantly, it invented every rule every other franchise on this list would follow. Slow movement, flesh eating, brain destruction as the only kill method, contagious bites, reanimation of all dead regardless of cause. Before Romero, zombies were Haitian voodoo slaves controlled by sorcerers. He stripped all of that away and created something universal. And here's the thing, he never even called them zombies. In Night of the Living Dead, Romero called them ghouls. The word zombie was retroactively applied by the culture that followed. The outbreak's cause was deliberately left vague. A TV newscast mentions radiation from a returning Venus space probe, but Romero dismissed this directly. Across his 6 films, the situation escalates from a single bad night in rural Pennsylvania to a world where, by Day of the Dead, zombies outnumber humans 400,000 to 1. That ratio is stated on screen. But here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. These ghouls evolve. Bub in Day of the Dead could shave, salute officers, read a book, and eventually picked up a pistol and aimed it at the man who tortured him. Big Daddy in Land of the Dead went further, leading an organized zombie army, using tools, displaying grief, and executing a revenge campaign against humans with tactical patience. Romero's zombies gain intelligence across generations, while humanity falls apart around them. Every film was social commentary. Night addressed the civil rights movement, casting a black lead who survives the zombies only to be shot by a white posse. Dawn of the Dead put zombies in a shopping mall with the explicit message that the consumers and the undead were the same creature. Romero never needed his ghouls to run to terrify you. Romero's Apocalypse ranks 10th, not because it's least scary, but because its slow collapse gives humanity just enough room to fight back. The next 9 entries don't give you that luxury. Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead doesn't just have a terrifying zombie virus, it has the most ironic zombie virus ever designed. And that irony is what makes it so dark. The 8 playable survivors across both games are immune. They can't get infected. And because of that, they are literally the most dangerous people alive. Every immune person in Left 4 Dead is an asymptomatic carrier, spreading the green flu to everyone they come into contact with. The military coined a term for them: Contango mics, Typhoid Marys. Safe Room Graffiti reads, "The only good carrier is a dead carrier." The people the game presents as heroes are the primary vector for human extinction. It's not even a flu. CETA, the government's emergency management agency, deliberately named it green flu to prevent mass panic. It's actually a heavily mutated strain of rabies. By the time anyone figured that out, the eastern United States had collapsed in roughly 4 to 5 weeks. But here's where it gets weird. The virus mutates fast, and it mutates specifically. The Tank, a zombie that can throw cars and absorbs thousands of rounds, may have developed its physiology because the host was using bodybuilding supplements that reacted with the pathogen. The Witch, who sits crying until startled, then kills in a single strike, may reflect clinical depression amplified by the virus-altering serotonin pathways. Valve designed every special infected type by observing what player behaviors needed to be countered during playtesting, then reverse-engineered a biological explanation for each one. The virus was, in effect, learning. The Charger, Jockey, and Spitter didn't exist in the early weeks. 0 survivors ever encounter the same threat twice. CDA's response made everything catastrophically worse at every turn. They told people to wash their hands. They quarantined infected buildings with living people still inside. They funneled tens of thousands into evacuation centers where carriers unknowingly infected entire populations in hours. One survivor, unable to fix their broken radio, wrote, "Fix it, must fix it. I have to fix it on a safe room wall," 8 times, then a blood splash. Nothing else. The Left 4 Dead Apocalypse ranks 9th because its regional scope and a starvation clock on the infected kept it from going fully global. The next entry had no such limitations. Resident Evil. Resident Evil didn't just create survival horror as a genre, it invented the concept of a corporation being more dangerous than the outbreak itself. Capcom coined the term survival horror in 1996. The franchise has since sold over 170 million copies, but none of that matters as much as what Umbrella Corporation actually built and what they were willing to do with it. The T-Virus was created on September 19, 1978, by combining leech DNA with the ancient progenitor virus and refining the result with Ebola-derived compounds. It destroys higher brain function, floods the hypothalamus with neurotransmitters that produce psychotic hunger and rage, and shuts off pain receptors entirely. The infected can lose limbs without slowing down. They feel nothing. They stop for nothing. The Raccoon City incident is the franchise's defining horror moment. On September 23, 1998, the T-Virus contaminated the city's water supply. Within 7 days, the entire population of approximately 100,000 people was dead or infected. On October 1st, the US government destroyed the city with a thermobaric missile. 1 week, 1 city, gone. And then the US covered it up. But the T-Virus is just the opening act. The G-Virus causes grotesque continuous mutations in living hosts. Las Plagas are ancient parasites enabling full mind control while preserving the host's combat capabilities. The C-Virus can be aerosolized to zombify entire city blocks in seconds. Then there's the Ouroboros virus, designed by Albert Wesker for deliberate global genocide, engineered to kill everyone without a rare compatible genetic trait while granting the surviving minority superhuman abilities. The real product was never the bioweapon. The real product was human extinction managed by a self-appointed elite. Here's the detail that nobody talks about. Some T-Virus zombies retain fragments of consciousness. In the Resident Evil 3 remake, zombie Brad Vickers pauses during an attack and appears to apologize to another character before biting them. The person inside the monster may still be in there, fully aware, unable to stop what their body is doing. Resident Evil ranks 8th because its apocalypse, as catastrophic as it gets, has always been containable in theory. Raccoon City could be destroyed. The next 5 entries on this list had no off switch. Train to Busan. Most zombie franchises take weeks to collapse a civilization. Train to Busan did it in a single working day. Director Yeon Sang-ho's 2016 film takes place almost entirely on a KTX train ride from Seoul to Busan. That journey takes 6 hours. By the time the survivors arrive, South Korea is finished. An entire modern industrialized nation with 51 million people, a standing army, and one of the most advanced technological infrastructures on the planet gone before dinner. The virus was bioengineered by a biotech company that the film's protagonist, hedge fund manager Seok Woo, Wu, had financially propped up to prevent its bankruptcy. The man trying to save his daughter on that train is directly responsible for the outbreak killing everyone around him. Yan built guilt into the protagonist's DNA. The infection mechanic is one of the most unique in the genre. Transformation speed is directly proportional to how close the bite is to the brain. A neck bite converts in seconds. A limb bite gives the victim a few agonizing minutes of full awareness before it takes over. People watch themselves turn. But the specific thing that makes these zombies terrifying isn't their speed, it's their vision. Train to Busan zombies are completely blind in the dark. They sprint, they swarm, they climb over each other in tidal waves. But the moment a light source disappears, they stop. Completely. When survivors covered the train windows with newspaper, the infected calmed instantly. This mechanic matters because there are 0 firearms in the film. Every character survives or dies purely on physical strength, wit, and whether the person next to them is willing to help. That last point is where the real horror lives. Yan drew direct inspiration from the Seawolf ferry disaster of 2014, where 250 high school students drowned while adult crew members abandoned ship. Train to Busan has a businessman who survives by using other passengers as human shields and bait. He is the film's true villain. The zombies are just the mechanism. Train to Busan ranks 7th because, as devastating as it is, the ocean stopped it. The next 4 entries had no borders at all. 28 days later, the rage virus doesn't give you time to say goodbye. It converts a human being in 10 to 20 seconds flat. A single drop of infected blood in the eye. 15 seconds later, the person you were standing next to is gone. Not dead, not undead. Very much alive, locked in permanent homicidal rage, with superhuman endurance driven by non-stop adrenaline that lets them ignore amputations, ignore fire, ignore everything except killing you. The only insight anyone ever got into what transformation feels like came from the first human infected, an animal rights activist who freed a chimp from a research lab. Her last coherent words were, "I'm burning. These are not zombies." Danny Boyle has never accepted the label. The infected in 28 days later are living, breathing humans. They also have a heightened sense of smell that detects emotional states, meaning they can literally smell the difference between themselves and the uninfected. The reason infected don't attack each other isn't loyalty, it's chemistry. That also means they can starve. The rage virus overrides the instinct to eat, giving the infected a built-in expiration date. In the original canon, they were dead of starvation within 5 to 9 weeks. Britain fell in 28 days. NATO declared an epidemic by day 8, quarantine by day 15, total loss by day 28. The ocean saved everyone else. Then 2025's sequel, 28 years later, changed the rules entirely. The rage virus has mutated over 28 years. The infected can now feed on wildlife, eliminating the starvation timer entirely. Alpha infected show increased intelligence and coordination. And the confirmed sequel, 28 years later, the Bone Temple reveals US military black ops were experimenting with the virus in Scotland as a performance enhancer for soldiers. The infection wasn't just a tragedy. Someone was trying to weaponize it. 28 days later ranks 6th because its original design carried a death sentence for the virus itself. The next 4 entries were not so conveniently self-limiting. Dying Light. Dying Light has the most devastating pandemic by raw numbers of any franchise on this list. 98% of the global human population is dead or infected. Roughly 15 million survivors remain on a planet that used to hold 8 billion. And the worst part is that it was completely preventable. Twice. The original Heron virus was containable, quarantined within a single Middle Eastern city. But the global relief effort, the organization tasked with saving Heron, was simultaneously running secret level 4 bioweapon research on the virus. In October 2021, their lab in Geneva had a containment failure. The weaponized strain, THV, the tachytransmissive Heron virus, escaped. World governments collapsed within 2 years. By 2024, one functioning city remained on the entire planet. The GRE didn't just fail to contain the apocalypse. They manufactured the version that actually ended the world. But the reason Dying Light ranks above everything before it isn't the death toll, it's the night. During daylight, the infected are slow and manageable. But every single day at sunset, the volatiles emerge. Apex predators adapted to darkness. They match the player's parkour capabilities exactly, outrun humans on flat ground, and kill in 1 or 2 hits. Uniquely among all infected on this list, they are fully nude. 0 remnants of clothing remain because their cellular structure mutated so completely that fabric ceased to exist on their bodies. Their only weakness is UV light. Every player who has loaded Dying Light knows the exact feeling of watching the sky turn orange. Dying Light 2 makes it personal. The player character Aiden Caldwell is also infected. He wears a biomarker wristband attached to his vein by an elastic needle, with LED diodes shifting from green to red as infection progresses. Being in darkness actively advances his transformation. Every second of nighttime exploration is a race against his own biology. Stage 3 infection is described in the lore this way. Everything is itchy, so you scratch yourself until there is no skin anymore, just one big open wound. The GRE's final act of catastrophic failure came on January 6, 2025, within the game's timeline. Chemical bombing campaigns intended to save humanity instead spawned entirely new mutant types. All 19 remaining safe haven cities were then destroyed by missile strikes. Nobody knows who ordered them. Humanity didn't fall because the virus was unbeatable. It fell because the people in charge of saving it made it worse every single time they intervened. Dying Light ranks 5th because 15 million survivors means humanity technically still exists. The next 4 entries couldn't say that with any confidence. The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead's zombie virus is the most boring pathogen on this entire list, and that is exactly what makes it the most terrifying. There are no special infected, no apex predators, no mutations. The wildfire virus does one thing. It reanimates every human corpse, regardless of cause of death. Heart attack, car accident, old age, suicide. Every death from any cause produces a new walker unless the brain is destroyed first. It's airborne, with an estimated 99.9% infection rate, and by the time anyone noticed it existed, every living human on Earth was already carrying it. Nobody got a warning. Nobody got a choice. You were infected before the apocalypse started. The reanimation window runs from 3 minutes to 8 hours. Dr. Edwin Jenner at the CDC documented his wife reanimating at exactly 2 hours, 1 minute, and 7 seconds. He watched it on a brain scan. Higher function extinguished. Then something else reignited from the base of the stem. Whatever came back was not her. The US government's fatal error was concentrating survivors in cities. Since everyone was already a carrier, every death inside those walls created a new threat within the perimeter. The pandemic was declared August 25th, 2010. Societal collapse followed 2 days later on August 27th, Monument Day. The US government lasted 16 days. The military napalmed every major American city, including Atlanta. Robert Kirkman stated in canon that the dead outnumber the living 5,000 to 1, with roughly 1.6 million humans surviving worldwide. There are vast dead zones out there. There's like 10 people living in all of Montana. But here's where it gets worse. Variant walkers nobody saw coming. Burners in France have acidic skin that causes severe chemical burns on contact, the result of failed laboratory experiments. A Walker King in New York is a superorganism, multiple walkers fused into a single entity. And the French lab connection, confirmed in World Beyond's finale, revealed the virus was deliberately engineered. A French scientist's final message states plainly, you started this, all the teams, then you made it worse. CRM Military Modeling and the Ones Who Live projects total human extinction in approximately 14 more years, not from walkers, but from environmental collapse and diseases incubating in billions of decaying corpses across every continent. The walkers were never the endgame. The math was. In a since-deleted tweet, Kirkman responded to a fan asking about the virus's origin with 2 words, space spore. The Walking Dead ranks 4th because the extinction clock is still ticking. The next 3 entries had already finished counting. The Last of Us. Most zombie franchises get less dangerous as years pass. The Last of Us works in the exact opposite direction. The longer the cordyceps brain infection runs, the worse the enemy becomes. These aren't reanimated corpses. The mutated cordyceps fungus keeps its host alive throughout the entire infection. Living humans with hijacked brains, potentially still conscious, completely unable to control what their body does. Runners in Stage 1 have been documented crying during attacks. Whatever remains of the person inside cannot stop what is happening to them. Cordyceps evolves the host continuously, and every stage is more lethal than the last. Stalkers develop ambush intelligence within weeks. Clickers, infected for years, grow dense fungal plates across their skulls that make headshots nearly impossible and navigate entirely by echolocation. Bloaters, infected for decades, are encased in full-body fungal armor and hurl mycotoxin spore bombs lethal on contact. Each stage is built on the ruin of the one before it. Then there is the Rat King, found sealed in a Seattle hospital sub-basement in Part 2. The Rat King king is a superorganism of multiple stalkers, clickers, and a bloater fused together by 20-plus years of fungal growth. It crashes through reinforced walls, absorbs enormous damage, and breaks apart mid-fight to release independent infected attacking from multiple directions. It is named after the real phenomenon of rats knotting together by their tails. The development team described it as what happens when you seal infected in a room and come back 2 decades later. The Rat King is time itself turned into a monster. Civilization collapsed in approximately 3 days. The outbreak began in a Jakarta flour factory whose contaminated products hit global shelves before anyone identified the source. Cereal, bread, pancake mix. By Monday of outbreak week, Joel says simply, everything was gone. Within the first year, roughly 60% of humanity was dead or infected. After 20 years, an estimated 99.9%, leaving perhaps 10 million people from 8 billion. The HBO show added one detail that makes the infection geometrically worse. Underground mycelial networks stretching miles beneath city streets connect every infected into a single hive mind. Step on a patch of cordyceps in one location, and dozens of infected wake somewhere else entirely. The fungus isn't just in the hosts. It's in the ground. It's everywhere. Penn State entomologist David Hughes, Naughty Dog's scientific advisor, noted one fact that recontextualizes the entire franchise. Fungi already kill 1.3 million people every year in the real world. More than malaria. The Last of Us didn't invent a new threat. It just let an existing one finish the job. The Last of Us ranks third. The next 2 entries didn't leave 10 million survivors. They barely left anyone. I Am Legend. Before we talk about the Crippen virus, we need to talk about where every franchise on this list actually came from. George Romero admitted it directly. He ripped off a 1954 novel by Richard Matheson called I Am Legend when making Night of the Living Dead. That novel invented the pandemic apocalypse template. Every infection mechanic, every societal collapse scenario, every lone survivor narrative descends from one book that isn't technically even about zombies. The 2007 film starring Will Smith takes that foundation and builds the most statistically devastating pandemic in fiction on top of it. Here are the numbers. Dr. Alice Crippen genetically re-engineered the measles virus as a cancer cure. She tested it on 10,009 patients. Every single one was cured. Then it mutated. Of Earth's approximately 6 billion people, 90% killed outright. That is 5.4 billion dead. 9% mutated into Darkseekers, roughly 588 million feral predators. Approximately 12 million immune survivors on the entire planet. The virus went airborne in December 2009. Manhattan was quarantined. Both bridges were destroyed. By 2012, New York is overgrown. Deer run through Times Square. Lions from the Bronx Zoo have established a pride on the island. Robert Neville is the only human in the entire city. But here's the detail that changes everything. The Darkseekers are not mindless. They set elaborate traps, copying Neville's own rope snare design back at him. They domesticate infected dogs. They organize coordinated hunts led by an alpha male with a clear social hierarchy. And in the alternate ending, the one director Francis Lawrence confirmed was his intended version, the alpha male draws a butterfly on the glass of Neville's laboratory. A butterfly matching a tattoo on the female Darkseeker Neville has been experimenting on. He came for a rescue. He came for her. Neville has been kidnapping and experimenting on sentient beings the entire film. That is what the title means. Robert Neville has become a terrifying legend to a new civilization that replaced humanity, exactly as vampires were once legends to us. Matheson's point, made in 1954, was that man's time as the dominant species had ended. I Am Legend 2, slated for 2026, will canonize this alternate ending. The Crippen virus didn't just kill humanity, it replaced us with something else entirely. I Am Legend ranks second, but it still left 12 million survivors. The number 1 spot left the question of survival open in a way that is genuinely hard to argue against. World War Z. Every franchise we've covered today has something in common. A single point of failure, a city that could be destroyed, an island that could be quarantined, a virus with a starvation timer, a corporation that could theoretically be stopped. World War Z has none of that. It never did. Max Brooks' 2006 novel is the most meticulously researched, geopolitically comprehensive, and ultimately hopeless zombie apocalypse ever committed to fiction. The Solanum virus is 100% communicable, 100% fatal, has no cure, no vaccine, and no known natural origin. A single organism begins infection. Rapid amputation of a bitten limb has only a 10% success rate. The oldest confirmed Solanum case dates to approximately 3000 BCE in Egypt. This virus has been circulating for 5,000 years, and the zombies it produces require no food, no water, no oxygen, and no rest. They function indefinitely. Brooks described their energy source as a baffling mystery his in-universe scientists never solved. They simply keep going, forever. Patient Zero was a boy in New Dachang, China, bitten near the Three Gorges Dam. China's Politburo covered it up, engineering a military standoff with Taiwan as distraction. The virus spread globally through emigration, human trafficking, and infected organs sold as transplants. A fraudulent vaccine called Phalanx, actually a repurposed rabies shot with zero efficacy against Solanum, created a false sense of security while infection spread freely beneath the surface. Then, the Great Panic hit. More people died from rioting, stampedes, and governments killing their own citizens than from zombie attacks. Iran and Pakistan destroyed each other in a nuclear exchange over refugees. Russia executed every 10th soldier to suppress mutinies. Approximately 11 million North Americans died of exposure fleeing into the Canadian wilderness in winter. Nobody killed by a zombie. The Battle of Yonkers was the moment the world understood it had already lost. The US military deployed Cold War shock and awe doctrine against an enemy that feels zero fear, zero pain, and has no morale to break. Soldiers trained to shoot center mass, not heads. The Land Warrior helmet camera system fed troops live footage of their comrades being torn apart in full resolution. Satellite imagery revealed a horde stretching from Times Square to Yonkers, millions strong, still advancing. A complete rout. Broadcast live on international television. The US president suffered a nervous breakdown. The survival strategy that turned the war was the Rediker Plan, adapted from an apartheid-era South African doomsday protocol. It deliberately sacrificed large civilian populations as zombie bait, while fortified safe zones rebuilt military capacity. Nelson Mandela personally endorsed it. The emotional shock broke its creator's mind entirely. The plan worked. That is the most disturbing sentence in the entire novel. North Korea's response remains the eeriest data point in the book. All 23 million citizens vanished underground simultaneously. Nobody has heard from them since. Nobody knows if a single person survived. Even after humanity won the war, Solanum kept going. Millions of zombies still walk the ocean floor. They emerge from Arctic permafrost every spring. They have driven all subarctic baleen whale species to complete extinction. The war lasted roughly a decade and killed approximately 2/3 of humanity. The cleanup will last generations. Brooks drew every institutional failure directly from real history. His zombies are slow and individually pathetic by design. As he explained, I wanted them to be easily defeatable, because therefore if they did take over, it would be our loss, not their win. That's the point of all of this. Every franchise on this list, from Romero's Ghouls to Solanum, ends the same way. Not because the infected are unstoppable, but because the humans in charge of stopping them always find a way to make it worse first. The corporations, the governments, the cover-ups, the denial. The zombies were never the real enemy on any of these lists. They just made it impossible to pretend otherwise. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.